Okay, we'll go ahead and come to order. Welcome to the second day of our first meeting, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs. We'll go ahead and do a quick roll call.
Senator Brennan, Senator Furphy, Senator Kolb,
Present.
Senator Pappas, Representative Berger,
Here.
Representative Nemec,
Here.
Representative O'Hearn,
Here.
Representative Obermueller,
Here.
Representative Pendergraft.
Here.
Representative Smith,
Here.
Representative Stivar,
Present.
Representative Wiley,
Here.
Co-Chairman Brown,
Here.
Chairman Boner. All are present, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we got Military Day today and also Homeland Security at the end. So welcome, Director Bud, especially you, since this is not your usual committee, but glad you guys are here. We'll see what we can do to help you. Yeah, I got a good agenda going on here today. And then, of course, we'll see what we can do to see what Representative Nemec does in his actual job when he's not here. And so, yeah, let's keep the discussion thorough but to the point. And with that, Mr. Smith, I'm assuming you'll take the lead here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Chris Smith, the Director of the Commander's Action Group for the Wyoming National Guard. Major General Porter sends his regrets. He's sick as a dog. He went to Tunisia 2 weeks ago and he's still sick. So you got us. Chief Moore and I will go through this. Chief Moore will start with our kind of background in our reports, and then we'll move into the interim topics and some of the other reports the committee asked for. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Moore.
Committee, Chairman. I am Chief Master Sergeant Josh Moore, the Command Senior Enlisted Leader for the Wyoming Military Department. And next slide. What we'll start out with here is something we feel is important and we do during our military update brief for you guys. This is basically a macro view of basically the strategic risk we're looking at as a military department. This is clearly outside of the state of Wyoming, but this is the things we worry about and make sure that our force is prepared to understand and be to look at. This one pager came from the Army G2, which is the Intel version. This will not be an Intel brief, but it is what we call the VUCA slide. So VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity at the top. Means it's a complex, ambiguous world out there, a lot of things going on. The things we remind folks of is to make sure as you look across this slide, how many of these things are you aware of? How many of these things do you know? And if you don't know, you might want to make sure that you're getting the right information from the right sources and that you're getting information that touches on all these things because it is a complex environment. The thing, as you take a global assessment, biggest thing is awareness. And then to understand the one thing in the world right now that's going on that is pretty unique, and we're in the middle of this right now, this summer, is if you look at that bottom underneath that flag circle, the over 64 countries, 50% of the world's populations are holding elections in their democracies right now. That opens the door for a lot of things to happen and a lot of people trying to get their way across the world right now. So that creates this environment that we tend to be in. The EU, I think, just finished up some big elections. Mexico just finished up some stuff. So it's happening across the globe. The next thing to consider is what are our enemies doing across these environments? We know for a fact, if you look, and we're especially focused on the African continent because of our state partner in Tunisia, and we get a lot of briefs about what's happening there. We know that Russia and China is heavily involved on that continent. And if you look, China is our pacing threat. We're trying to keep up with China. We're trying to stay ahead of China. And Russia is an acute threat. We're all aware of that if you pay attention to the news there. And those two entities are heavily involved on the African continent. If you ever want to see how that affects our interest in Africa, if you look at what's currently going on in Niger, and we may be losing a base that we put a lot of money and effort into, and people in Niger we're being asked to leave. Chad, that's happened as well. So those are the things for us to be aware of. We just had airmen deployed in Djibouti, where there is a Chinese base in Djibouti. So we'll talk about that when we talk about what we've been doing as the Wyoming Military Department over the last year and the upcoming in the future. But that's really the point of this slide, is to make sure that we're aware of that VUCA environment, what we call out there across the globe. If there's no questions there, I'll go to the next slide. All right. So for the Air Guard, we have been busy and we're in busyness right now as far as deployments go. Like I said, we had 137 members deployed in a 4-ship, what we sent to Djibouti, Africa. Those were all the people that took to keep the 4-ship flying and doing what they need to do at the JTF Joint Task Force Horn of Africa, flying missions for them out of Djibouti. We were fortunate enough with the governor to be able to visit them in January to see how they were doing. It was a great mission for them, and they came home back in March, and we were happy to have them back. Currently, on the support side for the Air National Guard, we deploy in smaller teams across multiple areas of responsibility, and there's about 83 folks either in the process of already in country or getting in country, from deployments from 90 days all the way up to 180 days across, and they'll be out there all year across multiple areas of responsibility. That's the Air Guard. For the Army Guard, they're ramping up and they're doing a big mission, one of the largest ones they've done in a while. They're sending out 364 soldiers out of their Field Artillery Regiment, the 2-300. They'll be leaving at the end of July to prepare for a year-long deployment to do Operation Spartan Shield and Operation Inherent Resolve in the CENTCOM AOR, which is the Middle East. And we know how volatile that is right now. And they'll be headed that way. And shortly behind them, a couple months later, we'll be sending 132 more soldiers out to take care of the Higher Headquarters Brigade and the Field Artillery Brigade. And they will doing the same mission that the Field Artillery guys are doing. They'll be the Higher Headquarters for them. So we'll have both those entities they'll be on boots on the ground after they primo about 8 to 9 months in country. And that will be a busy year for the Army Guard. And then our joint staff.
And Chief, real quick,
Yes.
you're saying with those Army Guard deployments, 47 FTUS, what does FTUS mean?
Yes, Chairman, that means the full-time unit support staff. So all these units have full-time entities. So about 30% of our force is full-time. A lot of those large full-time folks are moving out. So we're going to lose capacity and capability in the state while those folks are deployed, because we won't have the full-timers that we normally have there.
And follow up on that, in terms of percent, how much, I mean, that's over almost 500 soldiers. How much?
That's
of the-
about a third of the Army Guard strength.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, please proceed.
And then on our joint staff, General Mulberry's joint staff, they've been preparing to take care of, make sure that we can take care of Wyoming. They just had recently a flood and fire tabletop exercise hosted at Camp Guernsey. We were lucky enough to have WOS and forestry and county emergency managers there. And they got a lot of things worked out, talking about policy and procedures as they move forward to tackle those things as the citizens of the state need us in emergency environments, floods, fires, things like that. So it was a very good tabletop exercise that all entities that needed to be there were there, and we got some things done. We also had what we call our first muster and time capsule last week in Cheyenne. We had some folks that came and saw us do that. So we've been celebrating our history and heritage as the state of Wyoming and the state militia. And that recognized our first muster as a National Guard before we were in a state. And we buried a time capsule that's supposed to be opened on the bicentennial in about 80 years. We're pretty excited about that. And again, it's trying to recognize who we are and why we're a little different, and makes us the Cowboy Guard, is like what we call ourselves there. And that was what that was about. And then upcoming, we have Boys and Girls State. We get involved with them and we make sure that we can support that. Of course, we put a recruiting presence there as well. And we try to support them as much as we can. And then we have our Education Leadership Rendezvous coming up in July and August. That is something we have partnered with the Department of Education to celebrate our teachers of the year. We bring them in and give them a look into the Wyoming Military Department at Camp Guernsey, where they get to celebrate and do some things that they normally wouldn't do as teachers, but it also gives them appreciation and understanding what we do as the Wyoming National Guard. If there's no questions on that slide, we'll move to the next one. All right, and this is our projects update. This is what we have going on. We have them broken out by the services. As far as the Air Guard projects go, the CADM, Combat Arms Training Manager Building, that construction got delayed, and what you'll start to sense is a theme here. We have some stuff happening, and the cost of items are going up, as everybody knows. So our projects are getting a little sideways, but this one will, even though delayed, will get finished next month, and we're pretty excited about that one. That was a $13 million project. That's not on the slide, but that's what that one cost. Vehicle maintenance and aerospace ground equipment. This one is one of those that inflation, it keeps getting. We keep trying to rescope this project in the planning phase, and it keeps getting outside of the cost. We're up to 13.4 million, and we've tried to scope this building down almost to where it's project might not be worth it. So we're still trying to work to get this one completed and done so we can make sure we build a building that's useful, and we didn't scale it down to the point to meet inflation demands that it's not the building we need. Main gate, that's one waiting funding. This is a future request. The main gate at that 153rd Air Wing is a problem from a security standpoint. We're trying to get that redesigned, but that's a $4.9 million project. And we have it on a unfunded request list to get done. And then airfield fencing.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Chief, just on that, what are the, I guess, potential plans for that? Are you guys looking at coming off of Dell Range, utilizing the back entrance as more of the main gate? What are some of the opportunities there?
That will be when they study it, Chairman, to make sure that we can get it in a proper security zone. That might be one of the options, but that's part of the study that they'll do in the initial phase of design. Yes, we would love to get it off downrange because that would make sense, but you move it off downrange, prices start increasing quite a bit. Airfield fencing, that is a special project. That this one is a pretty small amount, so there's a different pot of money we can go after, and we have that on the list. Less than $1 million. We just need to get new fencing up around. If you've been around the airport there in Cheyenne, the fence is pretty old, and we need to get that upgraded and done. And that's one of the requests we have out there as well. So that's the Air National Guard projects. The Army Guard projects, the Sheridan Vehicle Maintenance Shop, for those that have been there, that's in the middle of construction right now. That one is moving right along. I think it's fitting there well, and everybody seems to be pretty excited about that shop being built, and it's on schedule to be done by the end of this year, December of 2024. The Cheyenne Geothermal Microgrid project. This is another one that inflation is starting to get out of scope. This one was approved through a different type of grant and look at trying to build resilient facilities, making sure that the campus space there in Cheyenne, the Joint Force headquarters, can get the energy and the power it needs during difficult times. This project keeps going up in cost quite a bit and gets outside of scope. It was supposed to be done, and again, the cost went up. So we pushed it to FY26 at this point, and we'll see what happens there. But that is another federally funded project, currently at $61 million.
And so with that one, that was part of our capital construction budget. Is that something that we're gonna have to reauthorize then?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, yes, we don't have a final dollar amount. One of the problems we've had, like our $13 million vehicle maintenance shop, when we got to 100% design, they needed $4 million more, and that was almost a year ago. And now the estimate from the bids we've gotten, well, I don't think we're at the bids, but when we're looking at it, now they think they need another $7 million. So literally somewhere 50-60% inflation rate in construction costs. And so with the microgrid, originally as scoped, it was like 41 million, and then it was 55, now it's 61. By the time we get funding, who knows how much it'll cost.
And I hate to even ask, but is that something where state funding could make it a little bit easier for you guys, so you don't have to go through, if we were just to supplement the inflation adjustment? And would that help, move it along a little bit quicker?
Chairman Boner, certainly we might get there for that ask. We hate to ask the state. These are 100% federal projects, or for really the federal mission. Although the microgrid has a very big piece in the domestic ops, keeping us, if the grid went down or something happened along those lines, we would still be able to operate and put units out in the field as necessary to support the state. But yeah, we might get there. We've only asked for that once in my memory, and we don't like to make a habit of that. So, but certainly, sir, that's a possibility as we get closer.
All right, well, let us know, I guess. I'm sure you will. So, all right, any further questions? Okay, please proceed.
And then we'll move to the next slide for Camp Guernsey projects. Unaccompanied barracks, we're moving right along. That project ended up being about 9.1 million. That's a big add to Camp Guernsey, gives us a lot more capacity up there. We have a great training area up there, and we're very excited that we can bring more people in there to train and house more people there on cantonment. If you have been on Camp Guernsey lately, you've seen this facility out there in front of the dining facility being built. And then we just broke ground last month on the fire station and control tower up on the flight line area up there. And that was a dire need, and that got added to a Milcom project for us. And hopefully we'll have it done here by December of 2026. Pretty big project. It really will change the safety and the fire response up there from the flight line area of Camp Guernsey. And those are the military updates for projects.
Any discussion, committee, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Let's see. So the next one is the Vets Commission.
And Mr. Chairman, I thought Tim Shepard might be here. He just had knee replacement surgery. I think you talked to him last week. So I'm not sure he made it, but this is the Vets Commission slide, just an update for the committee. They have 12 of 12 commissioners in place. That's appointed by the governor. But in June, at the end of this month, they'll have 4 vacancies. So if anybody wants to serve on the Veterans Commission, you can apply, and it's a governor appointment. Pretty sure there's no money involved, but you get to help our veterans in the state. We do have all 8 of our veteran service officer positions around the state filled. So that's good news, since they bring millions of dollars of VA benefits into the state annually. I don't have that number from last year. Tim would, but it is millions. I use them when I retired. They do a great job for our veterans. The records division is doing a great. We constantly, I would say probably at least one a month, get requests from various legislators and private individuals looking for military records of family members, trying to prove up their father's wartime decorations. We just had one where they discovered their father was in a campaign in the Korean War and got a campaign ribbon and never got it. He's passed away, but they were putting together a memorial for him. And so we worked on that. So our records division is really important to us. And in Title 19, the TAG is responsible for keeping military records. So it's a statutory mandate that he do it. Food insecurity program, that's a grant supported by a couple of different, I know the CUNY Foundation, a couple others. And that's cards that veterans who are having food insecurity, they can give out to. And that's a program that is statewide to help our underserved veterans. The Oregon Trail Veterans Cemetery, we just went through a large project where they redid some of the facilities to upgrade them. The legislature also gave us a cemetery director last time. As of 1 July, that position is being advertised to be filled. So that's helpful to us. We currently have 2 full-time people, so that'll bring us to 3. The national average is 4, so we're doing good, having 3. The Highly Rural Transportation Program is a VA program, and they've received an additional $500,000 in funding. That started in the tens of thousands of dollars, so it's really kind of taken off. And it's really just a way for volunteers to take veterans to VA centers around the state. Since we're a big state and not low populace, that some people have to drive many hours, and this helps those veterans who aren't comfortable driving hours to get to a medical appointment.
Chris, on that, just out of curiosity, that originally was being done out of South Dakota, if I remember correctly. Has that branched into the state? We actually have in-state people that are doing this now, and it's not just coming only out of South Dakota?
Mr. Chairman, yes. We now have our own program. South Dakota was still in a couple of the eastern counties but they've been working on transferring that over. It's a matter of changing phone numbers and getting the word out. But yeah, it's totally run by the Veterans Commission, and they have their own people, they're trained, they have drivers. It's really taken off. But yeah, so South Dakota largely is out. I can't guarantee that they don't do any more coordination on the eastern counties, particularly up in the Newcastle area, but I think they were moving that way. Finally, a couple of more bullets. We do have the two museums, the one up at Casper Airport and the one in Cheyenne. We did get some money for a contractor for the Cheyenne one. Again, that will go in place 1 July. It's a part-time position. We've had a couple of people show some interest, so we're happy about that. And then the Veterans Talking to Veterans program, on May 25th, they had a graduation. It's really, Tim actually just received a national award for that program. It's kind of, he started it, and it's really taking interested veterans and training them up a little bit how to talk to veterans who are having trouble adjusting to life issues, and veterans tend to open up to other veterans quicker than they'll open up to their doctor or a mental health provider. So these are lay people. Any of us who are veterans could do it, and it's really taken off. It's a great program. With that, I'll stand for the committee's questions.
Well, just a little bit more about that Veterans Talking to Veterans program. Is there an appropriation associated with that? What does it take to run the program, and not to, get too far ahead, but what would it take to expand it potentially?
Yes, sir. It's through a couple of grants. I can't remember the source of the grants, but it's 100% grant funded. It's not funded by the state or the feds directly. You'll see when we talk veteran suicide, one of our possible recommendations is to expand that program to pay a stipend or something, so that people who are trained in the Veterans Talking to Veteran hold themselves out and regionally across the state for when VSOs or other people in the Veterans Commission find a veteran who's having trouble, they could refer them to somebody, and we'd give them potentially a little bit of money to be on call like that. It's one of the ways to try to address the lack of mental health providers within the state. Again, these are lay people, but as you know, it took a long time for my dad to talk about his Korean War experience, and it was only after I'd been in the Air Force for over 10 years. And he decided I was safe to talk to, I think. So the Veterans Talking to Veterans has been a great program, but there is a possibility to expand it. Right now, it's totally grant supported, cost the state nothing.
And do you know what the source of the grants are and the relative stability, I guess?
Mr. Chairman, we'll have to get that to you.
Okay.
I should know. I've heard it, but I don't remember.
Okay, because that'd be exciting. I mean, that's great that it's, no state funds right now, but also, if it's a grant, I'm assuming you have to reapply for that at some point. And
Yes,
so
sir.
it seems like there may not be the most stable source of funding there, so.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's
Yeah, and the grant is really to train people up. There is no money to pay veterans to travel or for their time. It's totally a volunteer program.
okay. Further questions, committee? Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you guys. It's not very often, but now and again, I come across a veteran who doesn't really know their benefits or understand, or whether they qualify or don't qualify, and maybe kind of been told through the hearsay and don't know. And what's your advice for me when I, encounter a person or persons like that, or veterans that need just a little guidance, and what can I do as a representative?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Berger, it's a great question, and we get it all the time. We do have the 8 veteran service officers. They're located throughout the state. If you contact the Veterans Commission, they can hook up somebody. Also, American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Disabled American Veterans all have a liaison. They call them different things depending on the organization, that help veterans get their benefits. The hardest thing is to get veterans to just talk to somebody. Our VSOs, like I said, I think are great. They can't always help the veteran. They have to work the VA system, but they know how to work the VA system. And the benefits that are out there for our veterans, particularly those with disabilities associated with their service, are pretty extraordinary, to be blunt. But just getting veterans to apply is the problem. And my own father-in-law, Air Force veteran, retired in the 70s, was in Vietnam, was involved with Agent Orange. He's 88 years old. Finally, 3 years ago, we got him to go back. He was 10% disabled through the VA back in 78 or whatever it was. We finally got him to go back, and now he's over, I think he's 70%. So as things change in a veteran's life, they need to go back to the VA, and a lot of them don't even know how to do that. So, yeah.
Go ahead. Use your microphone.
It's almost like sometimes we're just too prideful. Is that correct? Fair statement?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burr, absolutely. And I don't blame them. You know, I've talked to a lot of veterans, and nobody wants to admit they have issues. They serve their country for a reason, and it wasn't to get a benefit. And, but yeah, you have to get over that hump.
And Chairman Boner, Representative Berger, if you go to our website, Wyoming Military Department's website with the veterans, there's VSO links if you just want to give them that, and they can do it on their own if they're too prideful to talk. Absolutely.
Well, and some people just don't want to deal with the federal government ever again after they get out. So that's.
Which is understandable.
Yeah. Okay, and Senator Colby, you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just Sweetwater County, Uena County, there's a multiple county association down here that deals with vets and for veteran services. Could you expound on that to help out other people that may be listening on those available, what we do locally here
Right.
in this multiple county area? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Colby, yeah, you're absolutely right. Those three counties have their own. They have ponied up their money to support basically a veteran service officer. I can't remember what they're called. There's something like that. And so if you go, for example, to Sweetwater County's website, there is a link for veterans, and they have a phone number in there. But that's absolutely true. In fact, if they were to go to our website and talk to the Veterans Commission, they would refer them to these county VSOs. The great thing about the VSOs, literally, you sign some paperwork, you give them access to your medical records, and they run with it. The hassle of dealing with the VA, stuff coming back, having to be resubmitted, they do it all for you. So it really takes the burden off the individual veteran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up, I want to thank you for that association. I think it serves the vets better than was happening. So, but thank you.
So
Any further questions, committee? All right, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, that ends our up.
One more.
Oops.
We have one more.
Oh, yeah, right.
Last military update slide. He's trying to steal my last slide. So this is the state marketing funds, and this is money got added last session for us to help with state marketing. So when it comes to marketing through our recruiting channels that we normally get from the federal government, it's really restrictive money. We can't do certain things, especially when we talk about how we want to differentiate ourselves as the Wyoming Military Department. Most importantly, as the Cowboy Guard. We want to make sure we get our brand and our message out there, who we are and why we're a little different. State marketing funds is allowing us to do that. And this slide has our lines of effort on there and what we're trying to get after. And really, we're just trying to get that Cowboy Guard message out there to the public, to those folks that throughout Wyoming and people who may be involved with Wyoming, to understand that the Cowboy Guard is there. It's a way to serve. It's a different way to serve than maybe people have realized in the past. And that's what we do through those three lines of effort, to make sure we cover throughout Wyoming, that we also built some metrics that we make sure that our return on investment is correct, and that we are, we're kind of new to this, trying to understand how marketing works like this. So we want to make sure we get it right. And then the other thing too is to take the federal effort and see if we can synchronize ourselves in the spaces where that's not getting it as well. So we are grateful for this money, and we're pretty excited to be able to use it. Currently in the middle of using a lot of it to brand ourselves the Cowboy Guard. And so everybody in Wyoming knows that. And that's the last military update slide, pending any questions.
Any questions, committee? Okay, I have one, and not to be too biased here, but it looks like you're, doing good work with high school and college games and even doing CFD, but have you considered the state fair? Because it's the largest, youth event in the entire state, larger than state basketball, state track, and I'd argue probably the demographic that you're looking for anyways. So if you go over what your efforts are at the state fair.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I haven't gotten a briefing on all of the efforts, but we will have a big presence at the state fair. They've been talking to them. They're trying to have a booth. I know they're trying to set up what they call a selfie stand. This shows my age a little bit, where it's about the Wyoming National Guard, the sword and the shield, the cowboy guard, and people it's an arch kind of thing. You can take a picture in front of it. So I think they're going to try to use that at the fair, but they definitely appreciate the fair. They're going to be involved in some of the rodeos. And it's really what the state marketing money allows us to do. On the air side, the federal money is largely tied up in national efforts. There's a NASCAR for the Air National Guard. We get nothing from that. I'm not saying people in Wyoming aren't big NASCAR fans, but it just doesn't have a lot of presence. So I think our standard budget on the Air Guard side is $25,000 a year for that kind of stuff. So that usually goes into the handouts, the brochures, the trinkets, lanyards, all that good stuff. So what the state marketing money has done is allowed us to do things like selfie stands. They've bought a couple of TV radio contracts on the eastern part of the state. They're just entering into one on the west part of the state. So yeah, we're looking at where our audience is. We're going to have a bigger presence at CFD, which always, because of its a lot of national people, but we want to get our name out there, particularly during Military Monday and Cheyenne Wednesday.
Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That gives me the idea or the question. Do you have a presence here at Sweetwater County Fair?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Culp, I don't know. I will find out and get back to you. Because I know they were trying to hit many of the bigger fairs. We're trying to have a presence everywhere throughout the state, but I don't know about that specifically.
It encompasses. I had it on and went off. Sorry, Mr. Chair. It encompasses really well Southwest Wyoming in a lot of cases. So it's a really large fair that pulls in multiple counties that are nearby because it's so big and has so many events. So I'll just promote our county fair and ask that we have a presence there because I think it's important because it hits a lot of people in one location. So I wish if you could consider that. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Culp, well, thank you. A lot of the times we don't know those pockets. They have the state fair schedule around the thing. So I imagine we'll have a presence there, but I'll find out specifically.
Okay, Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe you two and General Porter could all write a bull at each of these fairs all over the state and put your name out there.
Mr. Chairman, Representative O'Hearn, I will gladly let General Porter ride a bull. My horse riding days are kind of past at this point.
Well, that's what he gets for not being here, I guess.
That's exactly
it. Okay, any further questions and or unsolicited advice from the? Okay.
And you are all welcome to email me your local state fairs and I will let you know if we have a plan for a presence.
Okay, sounds good. Please proceed, or does that wrap it up for your?
That wraps it up for the updates, Mr. Chairman. We're ready to talk about the first interim topic on use of deadly force to protect military property.
Okay, sounds good. Looks like Talise has a memo she's going to go over.
And just to remind the committee, the interim topic was to explore whether statutory changes are needed to indemnify the military department members who must use deadly force to protect certain prioritized military equipment. Federal regulations require us. After 9/11, we learned very dramatically that airplanes are weapons. So protecting airplanes, for example, is a priority in our security forces members on the air side. are required to use deadly force to keep people from sabotaging or taking off with one of our C-130s, for example, or a Black Hawk helicopter on the Army side. But protecting property is not a normal allowed. You can protect people, yourself and others who are threatened with deadly force, but you don't generally protect property. And with that, I think Talise will go over her memo, which will talk about the law.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hanson, staff attorney, LSO. I'm presenting a topic summary on the defense of property and the use of force by the National Guard. The National Guard can serve in one of three distinct statuses, which are state active duty, Title 32 status, or Title 10 status. Determining the National Guard status among these three statuses is important, as each determines the authority in charge and whether the Guard is limited by federal or state law. Under state active duty status, the National Guard is paid for by the state and is directly controlled by the governor. Under Title 10 status, the National Guard is fully controlled by the federal government and integrated into the military. Under Title 32 status, the National Guard is a state force funded by the federal government and utilized for operational support by either the federal or state governments. Federal laws govern the National Guard under Title 10 status. The Department of Defense establishes directives for the use of force by the Department of Defense personnel, including National Guard under Title 10 status. Under defense of property circumstances, the Department of Defense directive states that deadly force may be used when reasonable to prevent the actual theft or sabotage of assets vital to national security or inherently dangerous property, and to prevent the sabotage or destruction of national security critical infrastructure. In contrast, when the National Guard is serving under state active duty status and Title 32 status, state laws govern if deadly force may be used to protect military property. So going into Wyoming state law, the defense of property may be provided by statute or common law. Wyoming does not have a general defense of property statute. Wyoming does have a statute, Wyoming Statute 7-22-106, which authorizes a private company detention officer to use non-deadly force to prevent serious damage to property. The statute also authorizes a private company detention officer to use deadly force to prevent the commission of a violent felony. However, a member of the National Guard under Title 32 status would not meet the definition of a private company detention officer and therefore would not be entitled to the defense of property under that particular statute. So moving into the common law, the Wyoming Supreme Court has recognized several common law defenses related to the protection of property. In Horn v. State, the Wyoming Supreme Court held that a jury instruction on the defense of property was an appropriate instruction to explain an element for the crime of assault and battery. In another case, the Wyoming Supreme Court recognized the right to repeal or terminate an unlawful intrusion on property as a common law defense. In that case, the court indicated that a person may repeal or terminate an unlawful intrusion through the use of no more force than necessary. It is unclear how the courts would apply the common law defense of property to a member of the National Guard under Title 32 status who used deadly force to protect military property. However, the Wyoming legislature may create a statutory defense of property for military members, including the National Guard under Title 32 status, to use deadly force to protect military property. This has been done in only one state from my research, Montana. In 2023, the Montana legislature enacted a statute to authorize the use of deadly force by members of the armed forces and members of the National Guard to protect military equipment. That statute states a member of the armed forces or a member of the National Guard who is on official duty defending military equipment is privileged to use reasonable force as necessary, including deadly force, in accordance with published military regulations and doctrine regarding the use of force. And I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Very informative. And we have an example of a state that's already done something similar. So that's pretty cool. So any questions for Talise? Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question, is this on or off military property? Is there any precedent for that? Protecting an asset, say it's not located on base?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, it's property based. So in the Air Force in particular, if a plane is flying into an unsecure location, they will sometimes take armed guards with them to guard the plane over if they're staying overnight. There's a whole specialty within the security forces of the Air Force for that purpose. So it isn't really the location. What we have a problem with in the Wyoming Guard is our Black Hawk helicopters. The Army Guard has, or Army regulations have similar rules, but because our Black Hawks are on F.E. Warren Air Force Base, they're protected by the active duty Air Force security forces. So really, my concentration was at Cheyenne Airport, which is a civilian airport we have a lease. So at the airport, it's an interesting issue if you use deadly force to protect the aircraft. The active duty members of the security force in the 90th protecting the Blackhawks at their home location, they're covered by federal law. Not so much necessarily on the air side.
Does that cover it? Toys, anything you want to, okay. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, because we have our lease, and I think I can answer my own question here, but if we have traveling, we have a lot of military personnel in and out of Cheyenne's airport on a regular basis. And let's say it's a group of Apaches that come in or something like that. This does not extend to them. This is strictly for our guard-based members that are there, that are housed on that airport. If somebody else's group is coming in with an Apache or with Comanches or anything like that, that's still on them. Is that correct? That because they're active duty, they're based in a totally different limelight, I guess is the best way for me to say it. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're not extending these protections outside of our guard troops and airmen when we have somebody else flying into our airport that we have a lease on, because they're not on that side.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Brown, it's an interesting question. And of course, as Ms. Hanson said, it depends, right? It's the lawyer answer to everything. It depends. It depends on their status. If it's an active duty member flies in and stays overnight, like we've had some jets, we've had Apaches, they're totally protected. Federal law runs with the aircraft. If someone were to sue them for getting an estate because they killed somebody protecting the aircraft, federal law would control. If they're a guard member from Colorado, Montana, Nebraska, one of our surrounding states, Wyoming state law would control the use of that in our state if they're not in a federal status. Title 32 is a federal status, state controlled. Interesting issue. That's what one of the holes I was trying to stop. The idea and there's another issue we haven't talked about yet. The idea was it would be any non-Title 10 member who is in uniform under orders would be able to protect this and be protected under Wyoming state law. So it wouldn't just be the Wyoming National Guard. It would be Camp Guernsey is a perfect example. If people fly into Camp Guernsey or come into Camp Guernsey to protect those things, I have to tell the committee, this is never, I've been around 28 years, this has never come up here, but I'd really hate for it to come up and somebody be charged with murder in a county, like Laramie County. Don't know if it would ever happen, but the state of the law is ambiguous and that bothers me as an attorney. And so that's what I'm trying to fix. The other thing that in our research and our study of this topic, after we've submitted the interim topic, we have a similar but slightly different problem on the Air Guard side. In Cheyenne, we have 17 state security officers. These are state employees who wear the uniform, who are trained to security forces standards, given weapons, and sit out on the flight line to protect the aircraft. As we just heard, they are not in a Title 32 status. They are not in a Title 10 status. They are not in a state active duty status. So there's 17 of them. They're 100% federally reimbursed. It's one of those cooperative agreement things we've talked about over the years where the federal government's willing to throw money at us, but not give us people and positions because they're trying to stay small. But we have 17 of them and they're kind of hanging. They are trained to the same standard. They're ordered to protect the aircraft and they're not any kind of official military orders status. They're state employees. So I would like to see or would advocate for the committee to consider extending protections to those specific state security officers. Everybody else in the state is usually a law enforcement officer and have other protections. The other thing that we didn't mention yet is there is a statute in Title 19, which is the Guard Statute, 19941. It's on slide 9. And it does provide that no member of the Wyoming National Guard in an active state service shall incur personal liability, civil or criminal, for any reason, by reason of acts committed in the performance of their necessary duties. That's pretty good language. That's what I've always hung my hat on. We, a couple of years ago, defined active state service. The legislature did that. Some of you will remember that. I totally forgot about our state employees. Active state service is defined in 197101. It's on slide 10, and it does not include these state employees. So because of that, our request would be for the committee to ask LSO to draft a bill. We could incorporate the Montana language to make it very clear, because that's kind of that 19941 is kind of a weird thing. Will not incur any personal liability, civil or criminal. That's not typical criminal law immunity. It sounds weird to me as a lawyer. I've read it a million times and never really thought about it, but we really need state security officers to be included. So that is our recommendation on slide 10 on this topic.
Okay, Representative Pendergrass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just trying to wrap my head around the scope of the protected assets. Obviously, sensitive aircraft, yes. Battalion beer cooler, probably not. Having been on a number of convoys running through all kinds of places, are there ground assets like a battalion talk or something like that that might be considered, and how do we know what's included and what isn't?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergrass, it's a great question. To avoid getting into classified information, the federal government, each service, Army, Air, Navy, Marines, have a document that tells you what is a priority asset and what isn't. There are priority assets 1, 2, 3, and 4, I believe. I can't talk about what's what, but I will say the Wyoming National Guard has some assets that are ground-based that are a priority asset. And that's probably as far as I can go.
Okay, and so maybe that'd be.
It is not the beer cooler. Sorry,
Right.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and so, yeah, and so maybe that's something that we could get, massage the language to make sure that, we are giving you that exemption for those PL whatever assets and not the beer cooler.
Mr. Chairman, exactly. And if we called it, the term of art is priority assets.
Right, okay.
So if any statute that is drafted in any bill, we talk about established priority assets, then we'd be okay. The only caveat to that is in a major domestic issue, the governor through WOS will have critical infrastructure. And an interesting issue for the legislature is, do you want to authorize deadly force to protect critical infrastructure? Because those are not necessary. Those are not priority assets for the military. That's a whole nother ball of wax. I'm taking baby steps here. But I will tell you, when I used to brief the security forces folks, almost every situation, you can use deadly force to protect yourself or others. Almost every scenario you come up with, there's probably an element of that. If you're driving a truck at a C-130 across the flight line and the security forces member tries to stop you, they're probably at risk, even though they're not being shot at. So in most scenarios, you can come up with a reason why they're protecting themselves. But there are those scenarios where you come upon somebody trying to break into the aircraft and they're not paying attention to you, or they're throwing a bomb in the engine. That's what we're trying to deal with.
Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead.
So ultimately what we're doing here is what the legislature likes to refer to as belts and suspenders.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Brown, in a sense, it's a scenario we hope never happens, but like I said, the lawyers hate ambiguity. And in this case, we're talking about a murder charge and it's a big deal.
And so you'd be fine with maybe, speaking about suspenders, adding state security officer to the previously mentioned statute, and then maybe adding the Montana language as well, or something like it.
Mr. Chairman, I was talking to Ms. Hanson about it. That'd be awesome because it would make it extremely clear.
Okay, gotcha. Senator Kolb.
Could you walk me through what the use, first I couldn't turn it off yesterday and I can't turn it on. What the use of deadly force would look like? I mean, do you just shoot them dead, or do you say something before you do it? That kind of thing. And then the other question is that guard member to guard member. If you had a National Guard member trying to hijack a plane, does this give those people protection they don't currently have, or is that something that needs to be added? Is that part of what you contemplate, the need for this language? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, on the second part, it requires them to be objectively reasonable. So you can't just use deadly force for no reason. It would not protect somebody, one of our own guard members trying to sabotage the aircraft. But that's a good question. It's something we'll have to consider when we look at the actual statutory language. In terms of the first part, I have a former security forces member. Maybe he can answer it better than I can.
So what you're trained to do is to stop the threat. And that's up to deadly force. So you're stopping the threat. And if that leads to the ultimate demise of the person you're stopping, that's the way it works. Does that answer your question?
As long as someone doesn't turn my mic off again. The question is do you just shoot them? I mean, under some circumstances, you just shoot them. I mean, that's my question. I realize it probably escalates, but are you authorized in the strict sense of the word just to shoot them dead? That's my question.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, yes.
And I will say, Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, security forces are trained on a use of force pyramid. You have unarmed restraint, you have verbal warnings, you have use of, whatever they happen to have, a baton or some kind of gas or something. In a particular situation, it is entirely possible that when the security forces member comes upon the act, they have no alternative but to shoot. And that's authorized. If there is no alternative, I don't want to waste the committee's time, but when we were deployed in the desert as a military force, we had several terrorist incidents. The Beirut bombing comes to mind. One of the things I've always been concerned about with security forces members, I don't want them to think too much when people are charging at them in a vehicle, shooting weapons at them. I want them to shoot back and defend themselves. So one of the problems we have with training our security forces members, they have to make split-second decisions. And so what we're really looking at here is I want to protect them, even if somebody second guesses them and said, well, you could have ran up to them and restrained them. You didn't have to shoot them. As long as it's objectionably reasonable, I want to protect our members because they're doing the best they can.
Senate needs help. We're older folks. So say if Jim doesn't like Joe and one of them's out there on the tarmac and there's a shooting because basically they just wanted to execute somebody because they don't want, there's an issue. What safeguards? Are there always two people out there, or is it you have a whole, your own way of handling this internally? I just wondered out loud. I mean, I'm okay with the use of deadly force. I'm not saying I have an issue with it. I just wondered if there's any safeguards here for somebody misusing this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, there are, because it requires you to be acting pursuant to your orders. You aren't ordered to shoot your fellow member. So that would be murder or attempted murder, depending if the person survived. So this would not be covered because they're not acting pursuant to their training and orders at that point.
And in that circumstance, would they be subject to the UCMJ as well as civil authority?
In yes, sir, and the state military code, which adopts the UCMJ.
Okay.
So they would be prosecuted downtown.
Chairman Bowler. Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've mentioned different Title 10s and Title 32s and your 17 federally state guys. Are they all covered under the same thing? Because when I put on a uniform, I didn't know if they were on Title 10 or Title 32 or, they were special forces. I want to cover everybody under the same thing if we can. Because when you put on a uniform, you don't know what the guy next to you is under. So, hey, Joe, you can shoot him, but I can't. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative Hearn, that's exactly what we're trying to fix here. Title 10 people, federal law applies. So that's totally out of this. You can say anything in state law and it's not going to apply to Title 10. They already have their own protections. They're protected in this way already. Title 32, even though it's a federal paid for status, is under governor control. And generally speaking, it gets really complicated quick. State law applies. And then our state active duty folks who are on orders from the governor to go deal with usually some kind of domestic emergency. Those two, Title 32 and state active duty, are covered under active state service. Our state security officers are pure state of Wyoming employees, but they're armed. They don't fall under the law enforcement officer exemptions in Title 6 because they're not law enforcement. They don't go to the academy. They're trained by the Air Force, but they don't have LEOSO permitting for carrying guns and such. They're kind of out there hanging. That's a problem. I don't know if I answered your question.
Any further questions, committee? Okay. Well, appreciate the overview there from both LSO and the military department. Okay, so we'll go to public comment. Any public comment on the use of deadly force issue? Is there anybody online? Okay. Yeah, so, okay, looks like there's no public comment, so we'll go ahead and close that. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Okay, so,
Move the bill.
okay, so, and that specifically you're talking about what we talked about, the Montana legislation with the addition of the recommendation from the military department.
To get a bill draft that mirrors the Montana bill and have further discussion.
Okay, seconded by Senator Pops. Any discussion, committee? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up, we have our 10 o'clock topic. That is military recruitment and retention. Mr. Smith and Chief, go ahead and continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a couple of updates on what was done in the 23 legislative session. The first one on slide 11 of your package, which is up there. We expanded the educational assistance program where Guard members can get tuition assistance at a Wyoming school, UW, or one of the community colleges. The expansion was in House Bill 59 in the 23 session. It allowed people to give any unused tuition program because there was, 8 semesters, it was limited, to allow them to give it to a spouse or a dependent if they hadn't used it, and also allowed them to pursue a second degree. That went into effect on July 1st of 23. Because most people's school, it was really too late to really have an impact on the fall of 23 semester, so it didn't have any impact. Same with the spring of 24, because usually people chart out their financial aid for the school year. So in the fall, in the spring of 24, we did not have any spouses or a dependent, but we did have 3 people use their unused educational assistance program benefit to pursue a second degree. And that was allowed for in the legislature. So that's 3. This is a retention effort. In the fall of 24, that window will open on August 1st through October 1st. We hope to have, in your second meeting, we'll have an update on did anybody use it. What this requires is you have to have an unused portion, so you can't have already gotten, your 8 semesters. But also you have to have a certain retainability. You have to have your enlistment extended for up to 6 years, depending on what you're trying to use to give it to somebody else. That was the retention component. So at this point, we don't know. It's had a minor impact. We really hope in the fall of 24, we'll be able to report in the second meeting where we're at and if anybody's using it to give it to a spouse or dependent. We had a lot of inquiries about it, but nobody has used it yet. So with that, I'll stand for the committee's question on that update.
Any questions, committee? Okay, go ahead and proceed.
On the next slide, slide 12 in your package, we did a reimbursement of health insurance costs. Those members from the 23 session will recall it was Senate File 53. It basically said if you went on state active duty for that period of time, we would reimburse your healthcare costs because most people keep their civilian healthcare because you don't want to change doctors and systems and referrals. But the legislature wanted to keep the burden of going on state active duty low. So we said that we would reimburse them for the daily cost for the days that they were on state active duty. We set it at the TRICARE Reserve Select, which every National Guard member can buy into. There was only a $10,000 appropriation. It's pretty small. The TRICARE Reserve Select cost is for a family is $257 a month. Really cheap insurance, which we really encourage people to get. That works out to $8.56 a day. So every day they're on state active duty, we would have given them a reimbursement of $8 to try to offset some of their healthcare costs. Fortunately, since this went into effect on July 1st of 23, we have had no one on state active duty. So we haven't used it, but we do appreciate that the legislature set this up to try to defer the burden of going on state active duty.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to kind of skip slightly ahead here to a little bit broader question. One of the things that we're always talking about in this particular committee, specifically with the military department, is the national scorecard. What do we look like? How do we rank? Are we green across the board? A lot of these programs, something like this being such a small amount, I'm guessing probably flies underneath the radar at the national level. But it's a big deal to us when we carry these things out on the floor to, really stand up and try to show our military department how much we truly do care for what you guys do for us on a daily basis. That being said, what is it? What do we have to do to ensure that when these things are given, that you guys are making sure that this information is given out to all the troops and the airmen, and they understand what we're doing out on a daily basis? And one of the reasons that I ask about this, and the reason I'm doing this in particular, is because I had a constituent come to me and say, I heard a couple of years ago you guys were looking at taking the license plates away from disabled vets. That was never really a discussion. There was a slight discussion on whether or not, there was going to be a cap put on it. And that was when budgets were low. But when I sit back and I look at the amount of stuff that we've brought out of this committee in the past 8 years, it has been nothing but a strong determination to show the military department that this legislature will do anything and everything to make sure that we take care of our airmen and our troops. So what is it that you guys are doing on your side to make sure you're updating this committee? We get it. What are you guys doing on your side to make sure that this information is getting relayed out to your guys' group?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Brown, it's a great question. One of the problems we very much appreciate this legislature more, I've had contacts with people in all 54 states and territories. Wyoming is incredibly Guard and veteran friendly. The benefit programs, the protections we've passed over the years, I've been with you those 8 years, there's never been a big issue. You guys, every time we've come up with an issue, the legislature has addressed it. Nationally, on those scorecards from the DoD Family Liaison Offices, I think they changed their name. They usually have a top 10 list of things they are advocating for the states to do. We look at that every year especially before general session, and see what we can do that we haven't already done. Last time I looked at the list, which I think was last month, 7 of the 10 we've done. 2 of them don't really apply for us because one of them is, I think, income tax based. So we are great shape as far as I'm concerned. There's always a little bit more you can do. Some of these programs from 23 just haven't matured yet, so I hate to advocate something more. in terms of our individual people, we have a newcomers briefing that we touch on them. When everybody deploys, all the deployment protections get briefed to them. One of the problems we have with our members, which is just human nature, unless they're facing a situation, it's in one ear and out the other. So we do brief them. We brief the family. We bring the spouses in. They usually remember benefits better than the military member who's more concerned about deploying overseas. So we also do yellow ribbon, what we call yellow ribbon, pre-deployment and post-deployment, and we have people brief all this stuff. So if a member is not aware, typically it means they probably haven't deployed, because a lot of these things are deployment related. They haven't gone on state active duty, or they just weren't listening. I think we have a lot of stuff out there for them to know about, but I can't say that every member understands what the legislature has done over the years. So I will tell you, I briefed the retiree conference the last couple of years, and they are very appreciative of everything the legislature has done, and they talk to me about it all the time because they know I was involved in some of those bills. So can we reach every constituent of your constituent? No.
Any further questions? Representative Stiver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the daycare, I see that's not in here. And I've had conversations with a couple of my constituents that have gotten out because of the way that program's run. Can you explain how that's going, and do we need to change something?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, we are very concerned about childcare. There is the governor's office has coordinated a childcare task force that we're getting involved with, both on the Air and the Army side. They're looking at things to do to try to bring childcare, particularly to our big centers, which is Camp Guernsey and Cheyenne. It's a thorny issue. We have, one of the things that's hard is this legislature, another benefit that was passed was we reimburse child care costs on drill weekends. There's a form you have to fill out. You don't have to go to a licensed child care provider. It can't be somebody who lives in your household. We're not going to pay for your teenage daughter to babysit your kids. But if it's outside your household, there's a form they can fill out and they can get reimbursed up to a certain dollar amount, which is based on what the Wyoming government, Family Services says is the common dollar amount. We have that program in place for drill weekends. It hasn't been used very well. We just expanded a little bit. It was limited initially by rule to the lower enlisted ranks. We've now expanded it to basically anybody, officers, enlisted, we don't care. And we still just haven't really gotten a lot. People think it's too hard. It's literally a one-page form. Nobody has to, only the military member has to sign something. We just want some kind of receipt to show us an amount. So that is something the state has already done. The bigger concern about childcare, like I said, the governor's office is working it because it's a major concern. Post-COVID, we lost tons of providers. And given the inflationary constraints, they can't pay enough to their workers to stay open. So I think Cheyenne lost about 40% of their licensed care facilities. We've certainly seen that in the Guard. A lot of people used to do it for our Guard members or don't do it anymore. It's just not worth the hassle. So it is a concern. I agree with you, Representative Stiver. But we are working it.
And so a little bit more information as far as you eliminated the rank-based constraint. Does it have to be a licensed childcare facility to qualify, or can it be the only restrictions that literally can't be a family member in the house? But could it be a cousin or a uncle a relative?
Mr. Chairman, it can be a neighbor. It can be your father who lives down the street. It can be your cousin who lives across town. They do not have to be licensed.
Okay.
Again, we tried to keep it, the legislature was very kind to us and allowed us to be very broad because we didn't want to check their licenses. We didn't want them to jump through a bunch of hoops. We just want them to provide childcare.
Well, and as you stated, there's not a whole lot of licensed facilities anymore. So that's a serious constraint. So, okay. Any further questions, committee? Or you good, Representative? Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead.
With that, sir, I think our next slide on 13 on the slides, this is the referral bonus program we're going to talk more about because it's one of our interim topics. But in terms of an update, again, the 23 legislature created this referral bonus program in House Bill 38. It pays $500 for any current Guard member who has a recruit who enlists. They don't have to get through MEPS, the Medical Evaluation Program Station. They don't have to get through basic. They just have to get a name and sign a contract, and they get $500. So far, as of May 15th, we've had 46 new recruits who have generated $500 each to the military member. We call that a big success. That's in 9.5 months. We've had 46 recruits we may not have had otherwise. The program was a limited duration. It actually sunsets on June 30th, 26. So we don't have to do anything in the 25 session, but in the 26 session, if we want to keep this program, if the legislature thinks it's a value, they can reassess on whether they want to do that. It has a $215,000 appropriation, even at 46 referrals. That's $23,000. So we still have lots of money. But that's the update on the program to date. And then we'll move into the interim topic involving this and trying to expand it a little bit. But pending the committee's questions on the update.
Any questions on that program? So how's that 46 compared to previous years? How many recruits did you have on average in a 9.5 month period?
Mr. Chairman, we have in a minute, we'll get to some of the recruiting numbers. It's very hard. One of the hardest things about this program is we try to keep it really easy. So analyzing return on investment, how many of those 46 would have enlisted anyway? We don't know. You know, we don't want to make it hard. We don't want to make people lie to us and say, oh, I would never have come in. So we're trying to keep it very broad, but we'll show some recruiting numbers in a minute.
Right. I think that's how you justify it. If you have more numbers than you did previous years, that's how you could say, look, it is making a difference, and not all those 46 would have done it anyways. So.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Chairman, you know, our total authorized strength as of May, it changes almost monthly, is 2,889. That's Army and Air. So we're not a very big Guard, but when you bring 46 people in, that's a pretty good number when you only have 2,800 authorized slots. But with that, Mr. Chairman, moving to slide 14, this is our referral bonus program interim topic. And when this was created, we were very worried about fraud, to be blunt. So we required you to be a current National Guard member. That is fairly limiting, but that's what we started out with. The interim topic, as we've looked at this, without changing the appropriation, without changing the sunset date, we looked at it and we asked the recruiters, what can we do to make this more useful, to bring more people in? They told us that we have a bunch of other people who have asked about the referral program. And that would include military retirees, current military department employees. We have a bunch of state employees. We have over 200 state employees. And then those in the enlistment process who want to bring in their friends but haven't completed and become a member of the Guard yet. For them, we'd like to expand it, but they would put in the form. If their friend came in and signed an enlistment contract, we would hold paying the referring member until they actually gain membership in the Guard. If they don't ever gain membership in the Guard, they don't get the money. Again, we're just trying to be as broad as possible. We want people to bring in their friends, no matter where they are in the enlistment process. And so that's what our recommendation to the committee is in terms of expanding the program. The second expansion, which isn't on the slide, a couple of other states, Montana and Delaware specifically, have gone to $1,000 per recruit. I can't tell you if the dollar amount matters, but I just wanted to throw out there that that is a different thing that we could do, the committee could do, would be to change the statute for $500 to $1,000. If we have a $215,000 appropriation, if we brought in 15 recruits in the next 2 years, we would probably be close to 100% strength. So if we used every dollar at $1,000 per recruit, we'd be doing great. But so those are the two options. One is to expand it to who it applies to. We still like them to be able to touch them and have some connection to them and not just some civilian that could be lying to us. So that's why it's retirees, employees of the military department, and those already in the process is the ask. And with that, I'll stand for the committee's question.
Any questions, committee? Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I guess just refresh my memory on this question. Is the goal to be at 100% strength always, or 120? Where's the goal? No matter what's going on in the world, no matter what's going on, are we always going to say the goal is 100%? What is that number?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Berger, as General Porter has said to the committee and the legislature repeatedly, we need to be over 100%. Anything over 98%, generally speaking, when the national military authorities are looking at missions, taking away missions, aircraft updates, they are looking for strength over 98%. In order to meet the nation's needs and what we think the upcoming conflicts are going to be like, we really need to be over strength. In order to field full units from the Wyoming National Guard to meet the federal government's request, there's always somebody who's hurt medically. There's always somebody who's off a flying schedule, DNIF as they call it. So our goal is 102% strength. We are allowed to do that under the DoD rules about authorized strength. That's where we want to be, because that not only meets the federal mission, if the entire 115th Field Artillery Brigade needs to go, they need to all be able to go. And so that takes care of some of those people who just are medically disqualified, for example. The other part of it is domestically, if we believe that the next major conflict, if we get in one with the Russias and Chinas of the world, there's going to be a domestic component. We want to be able to send units to meet the federal mission and still keep enough strength at home to meet the state's needs to protect critical infrastructure, to meet disasters or, a bad thing on a bad day happening in some locality and they need help. So General Porter's number one priority is strength. 102% is our desire.
Representative Obermiller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you include military department employees, it's fair to say that some of those employees, their job is to recruit, right? And so are those people included in your request?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Mueller, all of our recruiters are on military orders. By our rules, they don't get the referral bonus. That's their job. So the Army had a program years and years ago that got huge national headlines about fraud, where recruiters were referring people to somebody not a recruiter and splitting the payment. We are very much trying to avoid that. So we have a hard, fast rule. No recruiters get any money. We're trying to contain who gets to refer somebody so that we can ask them and make sure they're not, a straw man that somebody's created to get the money. So, but our recruiting staff on orders do not qualify for the program. In fact, we have in place under our rules that if a recruiter is involved in the process, one of their senior people in that recruiting office has to confirm that this is a true referral. They have to talk to the person referring to make sure that nobody's playing any games. I have great faith in our recruiting staff. They have high integrity. They're working very hard to bring people in, but we just want to remove that temptation.
Okay, any further questions? Okay.
So the other part of this interim topic was to look at what we can do to engage with UW high schools and the Department of Education to explore recruiter access. We're going to owe you that a little bit. We mentioned the education leader rendezvous that's going to happen in a couple of weeks here. It's actually July 30th through 1 August. We make them MREs. They do a ropes course. They get to ride on a Blackhawk. And it's really just trying to show our counselors, principals, and teachers, leaders within their school district, that the military and especially the Guard is a viable option for our high school students. We've also talked with UW about their career planning days that they hold in the various high schools around the state. We don't have anything firmed up yet. We're still working on it. So I think we owe you something more on that. We were not able to come up with any legislative action required for this as yet. So but we owe you on that piece of this interim topic.
Any questions on that? Okay.
With that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes this interim topic. We do on the next two slides, 16 and 17, LSO through the chairman through LSO asked for some numbers. And on 16 and 17 are some of those numbers, and I can go over those now since we're talking recruiting and retention. The first slide on 16 shows our total strength as a percentage. That's the way we track it. Our strength changes based on authorized, missions come, missions go. So we use percentages. You can see that on the Air Guard side, we're not at 100%. We're currently at 97.1. I will tell you the change from 23 to 24, our recruiters are doing a great job. But a big piece of that was because they finally took off our books a number of positions in one of our units we weren't filling because we knew they were coming off our books. So I don't want to diss our recruiters because they're doing great. But the reason we suddenly got to 97% is we lost a couple of dozen positions. So our authorized strength went down. So our total numbers, which are increasing, look better than they really should. But that's just to be brutally honest with the committee. But we're very happy to be at 97% on the Air Guard side. On the Army Guard side, the committee may remember over the years when we talked about the bathtub, the post-COVID bathtub, which was our sessions were dropping and flattening out and coming back up. You can kind of see that in the 21, 22, 23 on the Air Guard side. Unfortunately, on the Army Guard side, the coming up part hasn't happened yet. They're at 93% strength and change, 93.5. We're analyzing that because our retention rate's okay. Our sessions are meeting or should meet gold. We'll talk about that on the next slide. We just aren't getting ahead yet. So we're working it and we'll show the sessions and retention numbers on the next slide.
Mr. Chairman, and then we got one down here
Yeah.
too. What's the number? So we're looking at 100%. What's the actual number for both of these?
So the authorized strength for the Air Guard currently is 1298. As of the end of May, we were at 1258, which is 97.1%, I think. On the Army Guard, our authorized strength, which I think the number just changed again, but the authorized strength is 1491. And our actual strength at that time I pulled the numbers was 1453, which is 91.3%.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Chairman, that was the same question. I just wanted to know what the authorized. I know that's working. I just wanted to know what the authorized strength was as well.
So yeah, Air 1298, Army 1491. That's how you get to the 2889 total strength for the Guard. And our actual Air is 1258, Army 1453. And that's why those 46 recruits so far, that's almost 2% of our strength. So that really has an impact.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
and is that all statuses combined?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, that is all military members. That's MDay or DSG or part-timers. That's our full-time AGRs, really those two, because some of our part-timers are also federal technician full-time, as Senator Pappas is well aware. That's all the military slots the Wyoming Guard has.
Any further questions? Representative Penninger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if the recruiters give you feedback about the primary or the main objections that they get, why people are saying no, maybe this repeated deployments over and over again. What are you hearing back?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergrass, it changes over time. Right after COVID, we had, we've talked about propensity to serve with high school students. It's fairly low. It's kind of a squishy number, and I haven't seen any recent surveys about it. I think high school students are high school students, so they don't really tell you the truth when you ask them, would you ever consider the military? And, I will tell you in terms of ASVAB testing numbers, they've come up right after COVID. They kind of dropped because I think it was hard to get testing done during COVID. In terms of other comments we get, as some of you have probably read in the national news, our high school students tend to be out of shape, over-medicated, have a variety of medical conditions. I've seen numbers nationally that only about 40% of high school seniors would even qualify to be in the military. So our pool in the last 5-10 years has definitely shrunk. What the recruiters tell me is they still get people off the street just wanting to serve. They want to serve their country. One of the things in our marketing campaign, we're trying to make sure people in the state of Wyoming know they have a local hometown guard. The current generation tells us they want to serve. They want to impact their communities. They want to do more. They don't want to be told where to go. Like if you join the active duty, you might end up in England like I did. It was a tough assignment, but somebody had to go. But you never know. You might be in Cannon Air Force Base in West Texas. So in the Guard, you have that opportunity to stay in your hometown. You can serve in Wyoming. You can go overseas. You can do a lot of cool stuff. But you can also, do the flood relief in Saratoga. You can, guard buildings after a hailstorm in Pine Bluffs. You can do a lot of stuff, which we are told people don't understand that when we talk to high school students. They don't realize that the Guard's not going to, when you join the Wyoming National Guard, your boss is the governor. You're not going to get sent to another state unless you volunteer to go. You're not going to go overseas all the time. But those are kind of the things we get from people. So sorry, I can get on the bandwagon and talk a long time because I think the Guard's a wonderful. I was on active duty. I was in the reserves. I joined the Guard in 2002. It's a great thing.
Okay, any further questions?
Oh, I'm waiting for the text.
Okay, so, okay, appreciate it. Please, well, actually, I have one question going back to all those referral programs. That, it seems like only one is really taken off. And we did have an additional position to the staff, to your staff, right?
Mhm.
So how's that going? I guess, what's the workload of that additional position? Are they well employed, I guess? Are you keeping them busy?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we added a second benefits people to manage all these benefits. That did get hired. Interestingly, it was one of our people from Cowboy Challenge, our educator. So we're very welcome to that because a big part of the time consuming they do is running the educational assistance program with UW in the community colleges. So we have an educator now in the benefits program. They just started not even a month ago. So we think it's going to have a big impact on processing, but we can't tell you yet what that looks like because we just filled the position.
Any further questions? Okay, anything else?
General Porter reminded me by text that the Army authorized strength is 1591. So we should be at 2989 as total strength. I was off by 100. Don't know where I got that number, but 1591 for the Army Guard.
Is the general watching us online?
Apparently so, sir. I guess I'll be graded after this.
He wasn't happy about the bull riding comment.
He did not volunteer. I'm trying not to pay attention to my phone while talking to y'all.
Okay, any further questions? Okay.
To finish out this one on slide 17, we have the recruiting numbers over the last 10 years and retention rates over the last 10 years. Again, on the left, the Air Guard, you can see the blue bars are the actual recruiting numbers. The scale is on the left. So you can see currently we're under 100, but our goal is 138. I can't remember what it is for this year. the jagged gray line is the retention rate. It's up over 93%-ish. Retention is an interesting animal. You don't want too much retention because then you don't have any movement within your force. The national goal is 10% loss rate, so a 90% retention rate. So we're above the national goal. We're doing good in retention. But we do worry you don't want retention to be too big because then nobody moves around, nobody gets promoted, you get stuck in the same position for most of your career. On the Army Guard, you can see, again, the green bars are numbers using the left-hand scale over the years. And on the right side is percentage, which is the red line, which you can see retention suddenly took off. This is another place where I have to make an explanation. It's a little bit artificially high. As we talked about, we have hundreds of people getting ready to deploy this year in the Army Guard. Part of the people like to deploy. They like to do their military job. They like to serve the country. Many of them have to extend for a year to cover the entire period of the deployment. If their enlistment was going to expire during the deployment, they can't go. So we bumped up to 94% or so retention rate on the Army side, but it's a little artificial because we do have dozens of people who have signed 1 year extensions, which goes into the retention rate, but it's just to cover the deployment. Once they come back from the deployment, we'll see if they really are going to stay in. So even though we're very happy it's a good jump, again, we want around 90% or a 10.99% attrition rate on the Army side is the goal.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Chris, when you're talking about retention rate, is that all members that are eligible to either end their term or extend? And so 90, at this point, 94% have said, yes, we're going to extend for that at a minimum 1 year. So that is everybody that comes up and on that year for their reenlistment. That's that number. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Brown, yes, essentially they enter into that window. It's a few months before your enlistment ends and they choose to extend or reenlist. That's the retention rate. So it does not tell us in 25, for example, if we have 100 people who are eligible to reenlist or extend their enlistment, what they're going to do. It has nothing to do with that until they enter into that retention window.
So, Mr. Chairman, to follow up on that. So, and the reason I'm asking that question is if we look at the fact that you had some people, we have an inflated number, there's a good chance. Yeah, we won't say that. We'll hope we'll have good returns here that the people who deployed, if they only signed that 1 year, there's a chance that number could significantly be in sharp decline next year because their 1 year minimum may come back and may bite us in the butt this year. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Brown, historically, there is usually an increase in people getting out post-deployment on the Army Guard. Back in the big deployment of 08, 09, when they came back, there were a number of people more than our general average that got out. In the deployment in more recently than that, we didn't see any increase. You just don't know. We're the Guard. We tend to be a little older than active duty. We have a fairly large percentage of people who are approaching or at retirement age. So they don't stay in. They have other opportunities. So we do watch that in terms of the number of people who are retirement eligible. But until they actually make that decision, we don't really have that number. So, but to your point, it is possible, we hope not, that we would see a decline post-deployment.
Last follow-up that I have here on this is one of the questions that I've heard or I've talked to many friends that are in the Guard is it always seems, whether it's Army or Air, there's no offense to the actual chief sitting here, but there's too many chiefs and not enough Indian slots, right? And it always seems to me that what I hear is a lot of people saying there's no room for growth. And it's the people who are staying in to get to that retirement age. They want to get there. They've hit those few slots that we have for lieutenant colonel, colonels, and or master sergeant and chief. And there's nowhere for them to go. So they just drop out because they know that they're never going to get there. Is that a discussion that you guys talk about when you talk about retention, and what can we do to, you can't necessarily force somebody out. I mean, you can at a certain point, but is that a discussion that you guys have, is about the mobility and the ability to keep the younger recruits or the younger troops and airmen in there for longer periods of time?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Brown, yes, we talk about that a lot. As I mentioned before, you don't want your retention rate to be too good because there's no mobility. We run into problems that you're describing on our full-time staff. Congress has limited the number of AGRs, active guard reserve people, who are on orders. It's what I was during my time. That's limited by US Congress. Every state gets their little piece of the pie. In the higher ranks, there's a further limitation on what we call control grades. You're only allowed so many of chiefs, so many senior master sergeants, so many majors, lieutenant colonels in generals, I guess. So that's Congress limited. We have fewer control grades than we have authorized AGRs in those ranks. So it's already limited because that's the way Congress has done it. So but we are aware of that. Chief probably has a lot he can say about it because he's been involved in enlisted grades review and some of the things where we look at our force and try to make sure we don't have people. We hate to lose experienced people because we need them, but by the same token, we hate to roadblock people who are in a position that they can't pin on as AGRs for years, waiting for a control grade, for example. Chief?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, this is an area we sit in all the time. We have multiple boards on both Army and Air that we try to make sure we manage the top of that pyramid, because it's skinny up there. There's not a lot of positions, and we don't want people frustrated and leaving. So there's multiple mechanisms in place that we use in both services to try to quality control our force, especially at the top. And we put serious action into that, and it's a give and take. You have a lot of experience up there, a lot of people you don't want to lose, but we understand if we take away opportunity, people aren't going to stay with us. So we put a lot of effort. We bring in boards from out of states. We do our best to be transparent and to be deliberate in that process. But there's always winners and losers in that, how that works out. That's just the name of the game. But we are very conscious of that. I'll also talk about the retention rate real quick, just to go back to that. What we, especially in an environment like we have right now, where it's difficult to get people to re-enlist, all of a sudden bonuses and things show up, especially the federal government gives us. And when you're deployed, you're in a tax-free environment. So what we may see during these deployments, especially on this Army Guard, you may see people who have extended and may extend again and re-enlist while deployed because they can get a lot of that bonus tax-free. So we don't know yet, we don't know what's going to happen, but we may see, to just give you a little more context, we may see a bump in retention because of that as well. So.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Committee Representative Steiber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On your retention, since we're on this, how do I want to, I'm just going to ask, is the investigations for harassment, sexual harassment, I know there's one going on in the Loadmaster section. The question I have is, how many non-disclosure agreements do you have out on all these investigations? For one. Two is, do you think that's part of the problem, is these investigations and troops not wanting to re-enlist? Because I've talked to 3 of my constituents, and as soon as their time's up, they're gone because of this stuff.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, as you know, annually, the TAG reports to this committee, it's due in October, our sexual harassment, sexual assault numbers. We do what we call a DEOC survey, which is a defense, it's a national program under a contract where we survey our force every year. In the most recent survey at the beginning of 24, thankfully, sexual harassment, sexual assault didn't even make the top 5 of concerns from our people. Statistically, every sexual assault is a problem. Every sexual harassment is a problem. In terms of non-disclosure agreements, we do not have people sign non-disclosure agreements per se. During the investigation, we tell witnesses, we order them not to talk about it because we're in the middle of an investigation. Law enforcement does that. Everybody who does investigations does that because you don't want people getting together. What do you ask you? What should I answer? Once the investigation is complete, that order that is gone. There is no non-disclosure agreement. That's something that I've heard from a lot of people in the community. Not a lot, a couple of people in the community. It's just not true. During an active investigation, you're not supposed to talk about it. That's just, if you're in an office, what did you see? We don't want people collaborating to come up with a good story. We want the truth. So we do tell them you can't talk to the other people involved. But once the investigation is complete, it's done. There is no somebody told me, why do you make people sign a 5-year non-disclosure agreement? I've never seen a non-disclosure agreement that somebody signed. There is, as part of the investigation process, they are told when you read your rights, if that's what's happening, you're told don't talk about this during the investigation. But that's all that happens.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Representative Stivar.
Thank you. Follow up. Because I've been told the same thing, and a couple of people I've had conversations with were not involved, but they were part of the unit, and that's what I was told. On the other follow-up, this committee authorized Workforce Services and Department to do EEO. I've heard that the guy at Workforce Services is not really helping out. He doesn't think he has to do with the guard. How is that working?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, it's the first I've heard of that. We use Workforce Services. So we set up that program. We have an MOU with Workforce Services. They have trained people to do investigations. We've had great interaction with them. We have 2 investigations maybe that they're involved with. They're not necessarily EEO, but one of them they're working on because we're not sure if it's EEO until they talk to the complainant. We've had great reception from them. So again, each individual, I don't know what they're being told. If they have a problem, I'd certainly like to hear about it because I have points of contact at Workforce Services. I think it's grown great, but I'm not a complainant. I don't know what they're hearing from people, but I would be very interested to find out because it looks like it's working really well. One of the complaints this committee heard over the years is that we investigate ourselves and that doesn't feel good. I'm not saying any of our investigations were biased, but when the legislature authorized us and Workforce Services was willing to take on this role for us, I thought it was great. And they're trained investigators and they work it. And I think it works well. So if anybody has a problem with them, I'd like to know about it.
Yeah, Mr. Smith, maybe for your October update, you could provide the amount of hours maybe they spend or give us some, some hard numbers as to what their involvement is so we can begin to analyze that policy change we made a few years ago.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, let's see.
That ends our interim topic on the referral,
Right.
recruiting, retention, subject to other testimony I think you have lined up.
Right, so let's go ahead. We'll take public comment on each. I think this is kind of a separate topic with potentially separate bill draft. So we'll go ahead and pause here, see if there's any public comment on Wyoming National Guard recruiting and retention programs. Any public comment? Okay. So seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment on that particular portion. Committee, what's your pleasure? Representative Berger.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to have a bill drafted to include I guess state employees in the military and the suggestions we had for kind of making the recruiting process broader.
Okay, cool. So
Reaching out the retention bonus, or it's not retention, the recruiting bonus to a broader group.
okay, as recommended by the military department. Exactly.
Mhm.
Okay.
Recommended by military.
Okay, that's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Pappas, I think. Any discussion, committee? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. Okay, it's 10:15. We'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break or so. Be back at 10:30, we'll say. We can talk about the Sweetwater County Fair later.
It's the big show.
It's better than state fair.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
Only one of three.
Wyoming's big show.
You say so. All right. So next up, we're still on the recruitment and retention. We have representatives from the University of Wyoming next. So feel free to come on down and provide whatever testimony you'd like to provide. Appreciate the information that you've given us. Okay, feel free to state your name, your position or duty title for the record, and then proceed with your testimony. Whoever wants to go.
Okay. All right. So my name is Lieutenant Colonel John Seeps. I'm an active duty TACP officer, and I am the current Detachment 940 commander at the University of Wyoming for the Air Force side.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Paul Hansen. I'm an active duty aviation officer assigned to the University of Wyoming Army ROTC program.
Good morning. My name is, Mr. Chairman, my name is Marty Martinez. I'm Director of the Veteran Services Center at the University of Wyoming. Retired military 29 years, Chief Warrant Officer 2 out of the Wyoming Army National Guard. Served on the AGR program for 26 years. So that was my active duty time. And then three years straight, been at the of straight guard time, been at the University of Wyoming for 12 years.
Okay, anything you'd like the committee to know? Did review your information, maybe a little bit about, what ROTC does, and it looks like you got good information on your numbers and how the university, I guess, supports you and how that relationship works. That'd be helpful.
Mr. Chairman, so for the Army ROTC program, you're seeing the numbers. I think they're generally what I've found to be within historical norms for the program over the last 10 years. The university provides the military department for the Air Force and the Army a block grant and an operational budget that more than meets our needs. They're invested with us in recruiting and retention across the campus and the community colleges. And then certainly for me, down to the junior ROTC programs, Kelly Walsh, Natrona, and then Central, East, South in Cheyenne. Other than that, the Wyoming National Guard plays a large portion in supporting my program, mostly through field training and equipment, Guernsey being one of the primary places that I go to train once a year. And I'll do that with a sister program out of Colorado. Other than that, probably what's not on the chart that we gave you or the information there, attrition generally somewhere between 15 and 20%, and similar to the previous testimony that you just heard. The reasons for that will vary. Generally in no particular order, medical grades via GPA through the university standards, physical fitness, and then other life choices, whether they've decided that this wasn't for them or they want to go to a trade school instead. And other than that, that's all I have.
Okay. All right. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, almost ditto for us. I'd say the biggest difference is we do not have the National Guard relationship that I believe the Army has. My program is almost exclusively active duty, even though I do recruit pretty heavily from Wyoming, Western Nebraska, Northern Colorado for our program, and our attrition rationale is probably the same. What I'd say, kind of what we heard from earlier testimony in terms of, kids these days being over medicated, and I would say even over diagnosed for a lot of things. And I'm not sure what that 40% number came from, but I know on a national level, it's probably closer to 20. As far as, folks that are medically qualified here in the US to serve in the military. And that's something that a lot of our attrition comes from initially. But aside from that, we're almost part parcel with the same with the Army and what he just explained.
Okay, so I have some questions about your both your numbers of enrolled cadets. It looks like it has gone down quite a bit since 2020 in both programs. I'm wondering, is there a reason for that, and how's that? I mean, do you have a certain amount of authorized, I guess, positions, for lack of a better word, based off of the national needs, or what's going on there, I guess?
Mr. Chairman, thanks for that question. So the analysis that I've done looking through historical trends gives me the indication that COVID is the culprit for what you're seeing on this information paper. Internally to the program, I've had some turnover specific to my recruiting area. There's an officer that's specifically provided to each program that does recruiting. So I've had some turnover there. I think within the end of COVID and then my turnover here, which I'll have someone on board in July. I may need a little bit of time, but I don't think that that's going to be a problem for me.
And to be clear, that's an active duty position. That's determined by the active duty Army, whether you get that recruiting officer or not, right?
Mr. Chairman, it's part of a table TDA similar to the active duty or National Guard. So it's a DA civilian position and hired through that normal process, but it's billeted. So I just have to have a qualified applicant apply.
Okay, gotcha.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, again, almost the same, although, looking back, we've had other periods even prior to COVID where we had low numbers and they've kind of ebbed and flowed. We are kind of on a rise. I think we had the biggest freshman class this last year. And a lot of that is aggressive recruitment. And even though that's not a high priority, at least on the Air Force side, active duty wise, between us and the Academy, we are overproducing for the Air Force. So I can tell you in the 3 years that I've been here, I've never been talked to about recruitment numbers, but we're kind of left to our own devices. And I got a full-time officer for recruitment and he's pretty aggressive about that. And I would attribute that more to our rise, just getting out to the various high schools, talking to students, talking to school counselors and making sure that the opportunity that the Air Force ROTC program provides is something they at least know about, because it is a pretty good deal given our, I believe it's a great opportunity. Given kind of the current economic environment across the nation. But yeah, I would say we're probably on an uptick now. I'm sure we had our impacts from COVID as well. I don't know if that's the priority when I look back over the last 10-year trend and seeing this previously. So,
okay, gotcha. Any further questions, Senator Furphy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask about the university administration. Are they supportive of the ROTC program?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, yes. Our university boss is right here, Dr. Stephen Barrett, and he meets with John and I on a biweekly basis. We talk a lot about what's going on in our programs and then across the university so that we understand what the university is expecting from us. It typically centers a lot on academic success for the students, and then the university provides a lot of resources that our cadets use on a daily, weekly basis.
And specifically, yeah, okay, a little bit. So it looks like you have the block grant for, I understand you have some civilian personnel paid for by the university, but then there's 137,000 last year. What was that go towards, I guess?
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, that is basically given our sizes, we kind of by ratio divvy up that between the Air Force and the Army. And we can apply that to non-scholarship cadets that are in financial need.
Yeah, agree. It goes to each semester we do a scholarship board. And then they'll go through the university FAFSA process. And this year we've been working with the university financial aid office to make sure that our students understand the changes that have just come out and the static with that recently. The block grant, generally on a 70-30 split between the Army and the Air Force program, provides the gap for the students that we have that have a demonstrated need financially. It may be on top of the scholarship that the Army or the Air Force has provided for them. And it could be that they are choosing to be in a non-scholarship status and a non-contracted status, but that gives them probably some financial flexibility to stay in the program because they have a propensity to serve, but they just may not be able to make ends meet on their own.
All right. So is that for tuition or does it go towards other things too?
Room and board or tuition, sir.
Okay, cool. Go ahead, Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Good to see you all. My question really boils down to, as I look at the numbers, between the commission and the enrolleds, it seems that there's about a 3-to-1 loss for those that enroll into the ROTC program that actually commission in and choose to serve. We don't have that broken down between the Army and the Air Force, of course, but I mean, looking at last year, just seeing the 4 commissioned, it seems relatively low, right? It is relatively low. If you can give me maybe your breakdown and your thought as to what the misunderstanding or where the lack of people that are willing to stay in and commission in, number one. But then number two, on a committee side, I believe it was Representative Berger asked the question, what is it that we can do to help boost this program and the notoriety? When I think about ROTC, first thing that comes to my mind, right, is Texas A&M, right? You got tons and tons of faithful servants that want to go serve, they want to go do this, and they've got that drive. What is it that we can do help on this side to try to push Wyoming into that same level of excitement for the military? I mean, again, we just had this discussion with the military department. The legislature loves military, right? That's what we want to do. Why is it that the university doesn't feel, or we don't see that same excitement that maybe the rest of the Guard members do, or something along those lines?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, thank you. That's a probably somewhat of a difficult question to answer, so I'll give my best shot at it. The numbers that we provided don't really tell part of the story. The back end of this is the Air Force and the Army, like we said, are overproducing officers. With that, every year there's a mission that we get for contracting a number of students, and then a mission for commissioning students. Currently, right now, my mission given to me by the Cadet Command is 15. So because we know that there's going to be life choices, and then the different reasons why someone will come on campus and then depart campus, there's that attrition model where I'm generally looking to bring into the program a minimum of somewhere around 30 or 35 students that may be interested in the program. And by the time I get to my senior year with that freshman class, I probably have 15 to 18, which is generally the averages from my program. With respect to Texas A&M, a wonderful institution, except they're not the Cowboys. What I would tell you is that Wyoming is its own brand. And when I was assigned to this program, my Army ROTC program now comes with a reputation that not every Army ROTC program has. And it's known for the officers that we produce. The statistics that go into that are GPAs, their physical fitness, and every summer, currently right now, I'll have 13 of my students that go to Fort Knox for around 40 days, and that'll be an external evaluation that the Army provides. I'll end up going there from most of July and into August, and I'll be one of those evaluators. But I say all that to say that the performance of the cadets that come out of the University of Wyoming have a reputation of meeting and exceeding the standard very well. And my program specifically is ranked #1 in the coming out of that summer camp and those evaluations. And that's out of 36 different universities. So I don't disagree with you. Texas A&M is a core of cadets. The reputation of the program on University of Wyoming, I think it's just representative of Wyoming. You're not going to say a whole lot, but you know where it's there. And there's word of mouth that carries people into my program.
Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a University of Wyoming question about DEI. Do you have to comply with any of their requirements over and above what you normally would do? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, I'll answer for the Army ROTC program. So I have a federal curriculum that I follow. And Dr. Barrett and I have had a couple conversations. The university sees my curriculum. I don't necessarily believe that it has DEI in it, but it does have equal opportunity, equal employment opportunity, SHARP, and the like. So I follow the federal curriculum that I'm given, and generally the university and I don't cross paths on what they're doing or not doing based off of their guidance from the state. I follow my federal curriculum.
Okay, any further questions?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Representative Burr.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. You talk about these younger generation, the overly medicated or overly diagnosed. But I guess my question is, where are you seeing academically for this group? Are they prepared academically and just the lack of motivation? You know, obviously, it sounds like to me you want contenders, not pretenders.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Berger. Yes, sir. That University of Wyoming, I think, is kind of unique in that aspect. I know I talked to other I guess universities where, you know, and I think even getting back to earlier questions about our numbers, I think a lot of it's just, you know, the population of Wyoming versus other places like Texas, right? So I think we get a lot less people, we get to be a lot less selective, and I think where we really shine as far as what you're getting to is the size of us drives us to be able to give cadets a lot of individual attention. We find students that come to us in a lot of different areas of development, maturity, and so on and so forth. I can tell you that a lot of our cadets that probably wouldn't have been considered for some things or been given a chance in other places will find a chance with us because we do have the small size and we can accommodate that. And I think that they find an advantage to that. But we do find them in all the different levels of development, and we have to meet them where they're at and bring them up to where they can be an officer in the Air Force. Yeah, did that answer your question? Okay.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, well, appreciate it, gentlemen. I think that, you know, certainly appreciate all the things the university does to support you. But, you know, this is something we're looking at. What else can we do? As Representative Brown said, it looks like you all are continuing to do a great job, but that's, you know, hate to be the legislators that come and say, you know, we're here to help. And maybe that's welcome, maybe it's not. But it's, you know, things that we've done in the past, say with the College of Agriculture, and when, you know, really focusing on that land grant mission with the university, which is, of course, engineering, agriculture, and military. You know, when we've had excess funds, we've been able to put some funds away towards an endowment, which generates interest, which could further support your programs. And, you know, I just encourage you to, you know, think creatively about what else would you be able to do if the legislature were to support you like that. Great to see that you got access to the athletic facilities. But maybe that's something we could formalize and really, you know, reemphasize that this is, you know, you're doing good work. Want to make sure that that continues well into the future, and that's where the legislature can come and help and, you know, put that into, you know, even into the statute and provide that direction to the university to ensure that they're prioritizing their land grant mission. And I think that helps everybody, helps you, helps the university, helps our state. So appreciate you being here, and yeah. It's good to see you guys. So any further questions for the ROTC folks?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Not necessarily a question, just another statement. I'll just say that, you know, I've been serving for 8 years, and I think it's the first time that I've ever seen ROTC in either one of the two committees that they would come report to, right? So I serve on the education committee and this committee, and I've been on here for 8 years on both of those, and I think it's the first time I've ever seen it. So I appreciate you guys being here. But I think as the chairman just stated as well, that I think there's probably a symbiotic relationship that we haven't really delved into. And I think that there's something, certainly if the olive branch is out there, hopefully you guys can grab onto that and let us know what we can do to help support, because I think that there's certainly an opportunity out there for us to bolster the armed services and the ROTC program with the University of Wyoming and make sure that, and I don't disagree at all. There's A&M, they're Aggies, whatever, but you know, and I'm superbly proud to hear that the people that are being turned out of our ROTC program are among the top notch, and that you hold that in such high regard. That's amazing. we do quality, not quantity. If we could do just a little bit of both, I'd be even better.
It looks like that wraps up that portion. Marty, you want to provide your presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Director of the Veteran Services Center at the University of Wyoming. I know I testified before this committee, and I just wanted to kind of just reiterate a little bit of what we do at the University of Wyoming with the Veteran Services Center and the community that we support. The center was started in 2009, when they began to look across the country at what colleges and institutions were doing for veterans attending school. And they really began to notice there were a lot of loopholes. There were a lot of challenges presented with our veteran community coming right off active duty, especially right from wartime, and what they were encountering on college campuses and how were they being supported. University of Wyoming did the same, and in 2010, the Veteran Center opened. It was supported by a student at the time, and it was a student that was working as a work-study program. 2012, my position was full-time supported and hired. And at that time, we made a very conscious decision of how we wanted to support the Veteran Services Center. We chose that the University of Wyoming would support us by providing a full-time position so that we wouldn't have to rely on grant money to pay for the full-time person. It's really hard if you're going to recruit and try to employ a person over longevity if you don't really know that your money is going to be there for the next year for your salary. And so that was the primary reason that we chose that our funding would strictly support a primary person. After that, we decided that we would commit our full attention to raising money to support our operational budget through private donation. And that has been the way it's operated ever since. We take no money from the state, federal government, VA, or any other agency. Our money comes from private citizen who just wants to support veterans and our topics and our interests. Part of that was in 2018. We decided to go ahead and build a new facility. We raised almost $1 million, again, by private donation to put that facility into place. It supports us today to almost 700 students who are attending the University of Wyoming, either in a military, veteran, or military family member capacity that is using a primary benefit, be a VA or military-related benefit of their parent. You can see our mission statement on the fourth slide. To put it quite simply, our center is here to support our military-connected students, again, our veteran, military, or military family members as they transition from military life to civilian life, and especially to academic setting. We really set 3 pillars for our program, which was access and transition, retention, and student support, and successful integration to employment and community. I think the most important part of this is access. It was mentioned earlier, veterans are a little reluctant to ask for help, and it is a prideful thing. It most certainly is. A person who has done some incredible things in their military career suddenly has to come back and ask for help. And that's a very difficult moment for many veterans who are returning back. 19, 20 years old, we talked about those life decisions that they have to make, life and death decisions on the spur of a moment based upon their gut instinct, their training, and really just their ability to assess the current situation in front of them. And then to walk back and ask for help to come to a college or a university campus. We hope that we can make that so much easier. We've worked with administration at the university to look at the entrance program for veterans that at the time I went through it. I think every veteran comes out with anger issues. I certainly did. And for me, trying to navigate that system was quite difficult. And they've done everything possible to help us identify our veterans, work with them as they come into the college, assess where they're at academically and how we can support that and what we can do to build that. We've incorporated 6 programs, academic programs for our veterans coming in so that we can help them to acclimate to the setting they're about to enter so that they can get through it and we can retain that student and we can move them towards graduation and employment beyond. I really have to talk about our budget model because for us, that has been the most successful piece that we've ever done. I think our budget model, because it is based solely by private donation, allows us the opportunity not to remove ourselves so much from the university funding system, but to really give us full control of our funding to be able to spend on programs, on services that we can create, on opportunities that we can build to support our veterans on campus. And it gives us much more freedom, I think, than any of the other programs on the campus serving other student categories. This also allows us to have some wonderful collaborative opportunities with both campus institutions and departments, but also off campus. And I know it's been mentioned a little bit already, but we work primarily with the VA, the Veterans Commission, veterans talking to veterans. We also started a program. We're working with Ben Patton. His grandfather is General George Patton, World War II famous general. Mr. Patton has a program called the Patton Veterans Project. It's a mental health based program, a film production program. We've already had 2 iterations of that on campus. We're having our 3rd coming up in a few months. And it's been a wonderful opportunity to share that not only with community veterans at Laramie or our campus veterans, but also veterans attending our particular production pieces from all around the country. We also work with groups called Mighty Oaks, and then also various mental health groups that are everything from the governor's office to different institutions, whether they're supported by the VA or private institutions and groups that are really interested in helping our veterans and their mental health status. To give you a brief update on our demographics for our students, as I said, we had 692 students military connected that enrolled at the University of Wyoming last semester. We are up a little bit, and I know everyone talks about COVID, and we felt the same effect. We saw a lot of veterans leave our institution because of COVID, but a lot of that leaving was because they had to live as an online student. Then the first comment was, that's not what I paid for, because that's not what I like. And they wanted to be face-to-face, and most veterans, if you talk to a veteran, they'll tell you, I deal much better face-to-face, conversation to conversation, handshake to handshake. And that's really what they were expecting when they came to college. That was the struggle we dealt with in coming out of COVID, as we were leaving those opportunities of online classes and all the different types of settings that we were doing for learning. Our veterans began to return. And so we've seen a steady incline, taking us back to 692 last semester, which puts us almost at the ground that we were at prior to 2019. The largest increase of student I've seen is dependents. We're attending on their parents' military or veteran VA benefits. 184 dependents at the University of Wyoming are utilizing those benefits. So when we talk about benefits and supporting the veteran community, it's just not supporting the veteran directly by that benefit. My daughter also attended the University of Wyoming and also followed on in Utah, in college in Utah, based on my benefit. And my daughter graduated with 2 bachelor's degrees and no debt because of that. Now that certainly helped my daughter, but believe me, it helped me as well. I did not have to support my daughter during that time, and I paid for that benefit, believe me. I'm at 90% rated disability, and so that check was already written. I was not going to be the one to cash it, but my daughter did for me, and I'm very proud of her and what she's been able to accomplish. But the best part of that was my daughter was very proud of what her father did. Excuse me, and she worked at the VA when she came out as a payback. So I know it's an awesome opportunity we have to support our children and make sure that those benefits are most effective for our veteran community. That's something that Mr. Hepworth and myself take great pride in. And the question was asked earlier, what are you doing to make sure our veterans know about those benefits they have? I'm happy to share our information with anyone, because that's really what we do, is we want to talk about that education benefit especially, but we can also talk about other benefits. I'm not a VA advisor, so I cannot advise them on benefit or how to apply, but we definitely know our benefits, and we want to share that information with anybody in the state of Wyoming. And that's really what our focus is how do we support and serve our veteran community the most, especially those not right in front of us, but outreach to the rest of the state of Wyoming. We talked a little bit about the National Guard and their recruiting and retention rates. We see a direct response to that. Many of our students are coming, our National Guardsmen, whether they're airmen or soldiers, but they're coming to us. We talk a lot to airmen and soldiers or other members who are coming to us, or even veterans that say, I'm out of state, I'm not using a benefit that qualifies for resident rate tuition. How do I get that? The answer is our Wyoming National Guard. You can join it, and as soon as you do, you get that opportunity to receive resident rate tuition. So we sell that as well, and we try to support that as much as we can. We talk to our National Guardsmen and we tell them, hey, this is an in-service benefit for you. So let's make the greatest advantage of it. And I think that's one of the things that we do the best is not just talk a benefit, but how to use it to their greatest extent so that that service member is going to get the greatest benefit from it. As was mentioned in Gillette this weekend, there is a number of soldiers who are preparing for deployment. Mr. Hepworth and myself will be driving up there this weekend to sit with those families and talk about how to use those opportunities, not just for the military member themselves, but how that can extend into their family members. Off this deployment, they're going to gain the active duty benefit post 9/11. An awesome, awesome benefit. They're going to gain it at least at the 50% level. And if they've had prior deployments, it'll gain also at a higher level after that. They may even be able to gain it at the 100% level. As a retention piece, to share that with their family members, as I did my daughter, you must extend. And so you have to extend to ensure that you're still in. You're going to give the government another 4-year contract to make sure that that's an opportunity to share with your family. And we want to talk about how important that is. Even if it's not shared with all the members they want to give, whichever one does use it or as many as it passes to, it's a wonderful, wonderful benefit for our children. And I know in Mr. Hepworth's case, he has 3 sons and they all have a portion of his benefit. So his 3 sons will get to carry that forward as they attend their secondary institutions. The last piece that we really want to concentrate on, and I'm just going to wrap up these last couple slides. We don't need to go through them all, but there's two pieces I really want to touch on. And that's number one, our donor support that has helped us to produce 10 different scholarship opportunities now, one of them being for dependents. We've never had anyone want to really support a military dependent attending the University of Wyoming or any part of or aspect of education. And we now have one donor that has created that for us. He was a military dependent himself. He wanted to create an opportunity for veterans. As we talked about it, we talked about him being a military dependent going through and what his Vietnam era and Vietnam veteran father went through to put him through school. And so he said, you know, I'd really like to be a part of that. And he created an opportunity for our dependents. We had about 80 dependents apply for that one opportunity that we broke it into 4 scholarships, 80 dependents. That was more than the veterans that applied for the veterans benefits. 80 dependents applied. And I thought, holy cow, how am I going to go through and read all of these applications? And I was trying to figure out some way to whittle them out and weed them out. I read all 80 of them because I was so impressed with what those young students, those young adults saw in their parents and their service and the opportunity they now had because of that service. I'll tell you that our state is a wonderful, wonderful state. And these young people came from many states. But man, I appreciate so much what the legislature is, and especially this committee is willing to do for our veterans, because it truly affects not only our veterans and our military members, but it affects our families and it affects our communities. So thank you very much for your support. The second piece I really want to talk about is mental health. And it's something that we really look at and we struggle with, obviously, within the veteran community. I heard a report just the other day on a particular committee I serve on, and they said that it's improved. The old number of 22 a day, of 22 veterans who take their lives on a daily basis, we've dropped that all the way to 18. So don't believe the other number. I can't applaud that. I'm sorry. There's still 18 of our brothers and sisters who lose their lives every day. And we need to stay committed in this fight for our veterans. We need to find ways that we can support them, and we're trying to do that at the University of Wyoming. And the difficulty comes, and again, putting that veteran right in front of you when they need to raise their hand. I think that's one of the hardest times that a veteran will probably ever face, military or veteran, to raise their hand and ask for that type of assistance. In the military, when I served, you just didn't say those things. You didn't want to know those things about your soldiers, and you certainly didn't want your subordinates to know you were going through a hard time. And I did go through that hard time, and I did struggle mentally. And it was an Army chaplain that saved my life, literally. And I owe everything to that chaplain. But that chaplain saved my life because of a personal conversation we shared, and because that person sat in front of me and helped me. And that's what we hope to do, but it's so extremely hard in this state to do something like that, where everyone is separated by distance. Having opportunities to connect easier, in more easy manners and ways, with veterans all across the state of Wyoming, especially those in the very small communities that we have. Farmers and ranchers who are living away from main cities, the opportunity for them to reach out, be heard, and be felt is extremely important to our veteran community. We just initiated a project at the University of Wyoming and our Veterans Center, and it's called the Buddy Check Whoopee. If you're familiar with the whoopee, it's a garment, it's a hooded garment. It's patterned after a military garment that was a field liner jacket, most people know, or a poncho liner. And I remember putting mine on for the first time in 1984 at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and I was freezing. I was on guard duty. I was at basic training, and I'm a boy from Wyoming. I grew up in all kinds of weather, but cold and humidity I'd never experienced before. And that was a tough day. And I remember the drill sergeants came and they passed out these whoobies to us, and we put these. They told us, take your top off, your coat off, take your top off, put it on over your t-shirt, then your top, then your field jacket back on. It was the warmest thing I'd ever felt. And I remember literally thinking to myself right then, I can make it. I can do this. I can get through it. That whoopee, not particularly that one, but my whoopee stayed with me through my entire career. As I shared that story with a lot of veterans, they all said, hey, I have a whoopee and I understand it. And I feel that same thing. And one person said, it was my security blanket. It made me feel safe. So our mental health program plays off of this whoopee. We are committing ourselves and our opportunity to connect with donors to provide a free whoopee to every veteran in Wyoming and military member, National Guard. 2 promises go with that whoopee. It's our goal to really rebuild and restructure through that whoopee that feeling of security, safety, warmth, and comfort. The 2 promises for every veteran to receive it is, number 1, remember that you are a member of a family and you are loved. And number 2, check on your buddy. That's all they have to do. And to think it can be that simple to save lives, difficult, yes, but it is that simple. A simple reach out, remembering that we are members of a community and a family, and I can raise my hand and ask for help. And the second, to check on my buddy that may still not want to raise their hand and ask for help. If we can do those 2 things, then we can employ the resources that this committee and so many others have brought together and put at the feet of our veterans, just waiting for them to use, waiting for the rest of us to lead them to it. That's our hope, that we can really create that community. However, we have to get around the state of Wyoming. When we looked at the 300 whoobies that came in 12 giant boxes, and we both stood there and said, wow, what did we just get ourselves into? We know we're going to be traveling the state, and I know that there are veterans on this panel. And I hope that one day I can provide you with that whoopee and say those 2 promises to you and thank you for your service. That is our goal. And it's a lofty one, but we hope to get there soon. I'll go ahead and end with that. That's really what we do for veterans. And I'd like to take any questions you might have, and hopefully I can provide you with a good answer for that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martinez, for your continued diligence and excellent work you're doing. Any questions? Marty? Representative Pendergraph.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to reiterate my comments of a couple of years ago and my private comments to you. You saw a need, you went out and found the funding, you met the need. Excellent. Well done.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, so I have one dealing with some off-campus. How does that look? Obviously, you have UW Casper, you have online students, and it's my understanding that your funding at the direction of the donors is mostly focused on campus students. Is that correct? And just maybe a little bit more information about how that works.
Mr. Chairman, so in talking about UW Casper, I have a slide here that Rochelle Green, who is working up there. She's part of the veteran liaison group up there that works with our student veterans. She provided that. So just to give you quick numbers, they have about 360 students each year at UW Casper. About 10% of those fall into that veteran category. Of that 10%, a little more than half are online students. Rochelle mentioned that the largest need for UW Casper is the ability to support and serve our online veteran students who literally are all over the country. Their BAS organizational leadership online program alone is made up of 20% veteran status. So obviously they have a great number there of their group are veteran. About 70 of our students are online as well. So we're really looking at an opportunity to support them. It's hard, obviously, to support someone who's not in your community. We don't have a formal way of doing that. So our funding is for, and just a little bit of a correction for you, sir, but our funding is for student veterans, and we really don't have a classification on online or within the campus community. So we do have an opportunity to support some of those. We've chosen to make that support mostly into scholarship opportunities. And the reason for that is so hard to say what a person in New York State might need or how we would support that. So we give everybody the fairest chance possible of gaining funding from us, and that's through being able to apply for our scholarship opportunities.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's see. Next up, we have the Community College Commission. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Laurel Ballard with the Wyoming Community College Commission. I'm the Chief Academic and Student Services Officer, and it is really hard to follow that presentation. Just to highlight something for everybody, I am pretty brand new in the commission, so I will do my best to speak to this, but I may have to come back with more information since I am only 2 months into the job. So I think this is really kind of a follow-up from the work that you did during the last interim session. Thinking about the supports that the community colleges, they like UW, provide support to their veterans in a variety of different ways. We do know that they do things in providing the financial assistance. We know they provide the financial aid certifying official, which they have to have for veterans to be able to take advantage of a lot of the education funding. They also provide space on their campuses for veterans to be able to get together, provide opportunity for them to both study together, to socialize, provide lots of support for each other. We do know that is often done through additional fundraising that they complete to be able to provide those kinds of spaces. We've also seen them provide specialized academic advising for veterans. We've seen specialized financial aid consultation. They want to make sure, right, that veterans are able to take advantage of the opportunities and the benefits that are made available to them. To make the best use of those fundings for them and their families. They also have student clubs, so where they've got some that are chartered on campus. They also take advantage of some of the national organizations that exist as well, like the National Student Veterans of America. And they use that right to allow for peer-to-peer support. The Community College Commission itself is more of a, is less of an oversight agency and more of a collaborative and consultative body that really brings the colleges together to work together. And so I do think that there's been lots of discussion about some of that opportunity, and there's, I think, some opportunity across our community colleges to collaborate. We're finding that when they do that in many other areas, they are they've been effective at being able to lift each other up and be able to provide better programming and better supports for their students all around by being able to do that. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to stop there, and answer whatever questions people may have.
Okay, any questions? Okay, so just so we're all clear on what the status is, we did try to get a budget amendment, I think, last session at for a half position for the Community College Commission, if I remember correctly, and that did not fly. Is that a correct understanding?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't mean to turn on while you were still speaking. Yes, that is true. It did not survive the legislative session.
Okay, so maybe be a little bit easier for us to get a bill draft going potentially, and then try to trust our friends on appropriations. We'll see what happens. So, okay, any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate all the community colleges do for our veterans, but it seems like there's an opportunity to further enhance. Some programs are very robust, others perhaps are not, and so there's got to be a way that we can help support that while still making sure that our community colleges retain that local control that's so important. So of course you do that every day. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and do public comment, basically focused on recruitment, retention, and support of veterans within our post-secondary institutions here in Wyoming. Any public comment? Is there anybody online? Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and close comment on this topic. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Chairman.
Senator Pops.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to create a bill draft to resurrect that half position that we did last year. So.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Senator Pappas, seconded by Representative Obermuller, and yeah, I think that's a good start. Maybe in one, I guess, addition, I think the committee could probably think about is maybe have that also apply to UW students who are off campus. So then that will be hopefully justify a full-time position. And that collaboration works all the time up in Casper, and maybe with that, if that's friendly.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree. Thank you.
Okay, all right. And another potential, like I said, I don't have to have all the ideas here, but another potential is have the director of the Veterans Commission appoint an ex officio member to both the UW board and the Community College Commission. That could be another option for us, but that's outside the motion, but that could be an amendment. We'll see. So just things to think about for our next meeting. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
That motion carries. Any further discussion? Bill drafts? Hey, the only other option that I was considering we can think about a little bit, and we'll have our meeting in Laramie in September, is something similar to what we did with the College of Ag, getting some sort of endowment that would the interest from which would support military and ROTC programs basically, and maybe even expand that to have a broader national security focus. I know we got some professors at UW that worked at the State Department and so on and so forth, and they probably have a good good thing. I think they're doing good things as well. So something to think about for UW, and like I said, we're here to help, but want to make sure that we actually help and not don't screw things up in an attempt. So really do need your feedback. I did tell Mr. Smith that, and I guess I'll reiterate that publicly. We would like your input, and don't be afraid to be creative, I guess. I know things are going well, but let's see what we can do to enhance the program. It's probably never going to be a full-on core of cadets, and that's okay, but we could it wouldn't take much effort, I think, from this legislature to really further enhance what we're already doing at the UW campus through for our ROTC.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
just for sakes of discussion, nothing more than that. I would like to see us maybe draft a bill to have that discussion, maybe a little more in depth next meeting. Especially since we're going to be in Laramie, we're going to be there at the university, and that would give us a little bit of an opportunity for the university itself, as well as the veterans over there, to have that discussion. So I'll make the motion to draft a bill right now, and what I'll do is I'll ask for a placeholder of X for the amount of the endowment. But basically to do exactly what you're just stating, I'd like to see us have that discussion. Whether or not that discussion flows through and actually makes anything, I don't know.
Right.
But let's have that on the table for us to discuss in Laramie. So I'll make that motion to have a bill draft created for an endowment to support the ROTC programs.
Okay, moved by Representative Brown, seconded by Representative Overmiller. Any discussion, Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm adversarial to any endowment, and it's not because it's military or whatever it is. I'm pro having the state's ability to have maximum flexibility. I think throwing money away in particular places isn't the best strategy for me. So I'll be a no vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? All right, well, just as a reminder, this is a way that if we have excess funds, we can save it and guarantee that I'll go towards a good purpose that I think has broad support throughout the state at the university. And obviously, you know, sometimes when we discuss the University of Wyoming, it isn't always, you know, in the most positive terms, I guess, or it's more controversial. This is an opportunity to do something I think would have broad support now and well into the future. So any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. Any further discussion? Okay, looks like we're to our 11 o'clock topic. It's only 23 minutes late, so. All right, you're up, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're on slide 18 of our presentation. This is our third and final interim topic. And it's really, it was brought by the Veterans Commission and the Guard. We have a program, the Integrated Primary Prevention Workforce Program is new to us. It's been in place for a year. Thankfully, all the Guard units in the 54 states and territories got funding in positions for this. It was really trying to get at prevention rather than response. And things like sexual harassment, sexual assault, suicide, general mental health problems. They wanted to study the data and try to come up with solutions. In this particular topic, we're looking at military member and veteran suicide prevention and what could the legislature do to try to impact the suicide problem that we do have. On slide 18, we have some data that flows onto the next slide. Wyoming unfortunately does have, and you've heard this before, the highest suicide rate per capita in the country from 18 to 21, and that's from the Center for Disease Control. The Wyoming veteran suicide rate, which I'll show you some numbers on the next slide, is almost 3 times the national average among veterans. Firearms are used in about 72% of all suicides in Wyoming. It's the preferred method. And again, I have a slide on that to show you the other data. Turn on the next slide, on slide 19, you'll see some 2020 and 2021 veteran suicide data broken down by age groups. Really, the red numbers on the slide for the all are the numbers I think are important. One is the national suicide rate for veterans in 2021 was 33.9. So basically 34 people out of 100,000 veterans committed suicide. In Wyoming, the rate is 80. So that's 2.4 times, almost 3, the national rate. So in a sense, you could say the data shows we have a problem in Wyoming. We have a greater propensity in our populace for suicide in Wyoming, and it's reflected in our veterans. On the next slide, we'll show you the methodology. These again, this is from the VA about how I said 72% use firearms. The VA says 71%. It's a rounding error. 41% is suffocation, think hanging, and 6% is other, which is pills and that kind of thing. So that addresses the problem statewide and nationally. The next slide, on slide 21, talks about the specifics that the Wyoming National Guard is seeing based on our data. The Wyoming Army Guard reported suicide ideation. So these are people who say they're suicidal or make an attempt. In 2022, we had 17. In 2023, we had 9. So this is a mental health crisis for those individuals. Thankfully, they did not have a completed suicide. The next line shows in the air side, we just don't have the same data. We collect data different. We're trying to get at that because we want to be able to collect that, and hopefully in the ensuing years, we'll have better data on the air side. We just weren't surveying people and collecting the data properly. In terms of completed suicides from 2019 to present, we've only had one, and the most recent was 2019, thankfully. On the Army side, from essentially December of 20 to present, we've had two, with the most recent being June of 21. We spent a lot of time and effort trying to address mental health issues for our military members in the Guard. And thankfully, we haven't had any more suicides. This is actually below the veteran average for Wyoming, which is good. According to our most recent survey in 2023, this is DEOX. That's that survey I talked to, which is a national survey that we get data from for our folks. 59% of the members of the National Guard self-admit they don't safely store firearms in their household. Now, the last bullet is the so what? Why do we care about firearms? Research shows from the mental health folks from the National Institute of Health that if you can delay the decision, the means to commit suicide by as little as 5 to 10 minutes, most people won't do it. They'll catch themselves, they'll subside, they'll ask for help. So delaying the access to the means to commit suicide is a thing. It's important. When you're talking about firearms in Wyoming, there's firearms in my house. You definitely have the means to commit suicide. So we want to get at how do we address that when you're going through a mental health issue. On the next slide, on slide 22, and this is kind of part of the end of the data, we looked at suicide risk factors as reported through a variety of different groups. In our own internal surveys in the National Guard, the top 3 reasons that or suicide risk factors that are reported are relationship concerns and loneliness, military life balance or stress. 35% of our folks say they're moderately or highly stressed, for example, in our last survey, and finances. Veterans nationally, according to the VA, it's health issues, relationship issues, and finances. You start to see a trend. Community partners in Wyoming through the Department of Health tell us finances, relationship concerns, and some kind of trauma, just the way they survey. So as you can see, in all 3 of those population studies, 2 of the 3 highest risk factors are the same: relationships and finances. Relationships tells us about mental health concerns that we have as in our populace. We heard Mr. Martinez, identified mental health as an issue. All of us know that. So the last slide before I take questions is on 23. We have some data collection challenges. Veterans and our own people don't want to admit they need help. So we have some limitations in our data. We don't have a lot of veteran specific for Wyoming data. The VA, among their VA populace, has a bunch of data, but we all know not everybody's involved in the VA who's a veteran. Different sources collect data differently. And we really have identified that our mental health providers, even internal to us, don't always track what we want to know in terms of mental health. What I mean by that is the National Guard nationally has done a good job in terms of we now have directors of psychological health in the Air Guard and in the Army Guard. They track data differently in those 2 groups. We're trying to make that more uniform. But this is actually licensed clinical social workers who are full-time and meet with our military members in the Guard who identify an issue for anything, finances, relationships, any of those top risk factors. So that is our data collection problem. With that, I'll stand for any questions the committee may have about the data.
Any questions so far, committee? Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as a banker, when I look at these issues and finances was in all of them, have you surveyed people? What do they do? Get into big debt after they have served in the military. And obviously, we as a state need to provide financial counseling to these people. But yeah, I wonder why they are so concerned, but usually it's too much debt and they can't afford to meet the payment. Any surveys along those lines? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, there is some data. This is another one of those places where you get a mix. Within the Wyoming National Guard, this legislature years and years ago in the 2000s set up a grant program to offset the costs of our people deploying. The idea in the way it's been used is so military member deploys, spouse is home, the hot water heater breaks. They don't have any money for that. Normally, the military member would replace a hot water heater. You know, you go to your local hardware store, buy a water heater and get it done. Well, they're not there. So they can apply for a grant to reimburse them for that cost. Sometimes there's pay disruptions. Again, you can apply for a grant to, so the legislature has addressed that within the National Guard. Our directors of psychological health in our most recent surveys about finances, it's a mixed bag. It is a lot about debt. I will tell you a number of people have mentioned the high costs of medical care, all the co-pays and deductibles. So they have a major medical event in their immediate family, and the amount of debt that creates causes them stress. You know, you get a bill for an emergency room visit, or heaven forbid, a flight for life, and it's over $10,000. When you're only making $40,000 or $50,000 a year, that's a big deal. We've also, post-COVID, we certainly, in some of the things going on in some of the areas of our state involving natural resources, lots of people got laid off. Lots of the industries that were high employers in the state of Wyoming went away. So there's another financial risk. Those are the things that come to mind based on our internal surveys. We can certainly try to dig up some more information, but that's the kind of financial stressors that we see.
Any further questions? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question about firearms, and you're talking about a 5 or 10 minute delay. Before the boating accident, I had a lot of firearms in my house. They were kept in a couple of safes, but they were in a way that I could access them within seconds. How would you propose safe storage that would delay 5 or 10 minutes and yet still be useful in the event of an emergency? I'm having trouble with that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, it's almost like you read my slides. And what I mean by that is this is exactly what we were looking at. When we initially proposed the interim topic, we were talking about some kind of tax break. If you buy a safe, because we have people who have loaded guns just laying around the house. There's no trigger guards, there's no safes, there's no biometric, whatever. And in the bottom of slide 23, you'll see at the last bullet, many states, I think there's over 10, have done a tax credit to incentivize the purchase of firearm safety devices and equipment, gun safes, that kind of thing. The problem is, in almost every case that I'm aware of, it's an income tax credit. We don't have an income tax in Wyoming, thank goodness. We initially were thinking maybe we could reimburse a sales tax if you bought a gun safe through a state program. We looked at that, not sure it matters that much to people. Are you going to buy a gun safe or not because you get reimbursed for the 5-6% you pay? So, but that is out there. That is one of the ideas. The other one that's on slide 23 is we got this idea from the governor's challenge on suicide. They identified that one of the possibilities that has been done in Louisiana, Montana, and Arkansas is currently considering it. Federal firearm licensees, FFLs, if you ever bought a firearm over the internet, they are allowed to store weapons legally by federal law. They have a license to do it. Currently, our understanding is most, we're aware of one gun store in Laramie. If you, as a family member, are going through a mental health episode, self-identified, you could take your firearms out of your house, give them to an FFL who has been trained and licensed to hold firearms safely, voluntarily. The problem we run into from talking to FFL holders is they're very concerned about the liability when you ask for them back. We don't want to keep you from being able to ask for them back. They're your guns. This is not a red flag law. This is Wyoming. If you want to keep your guns, this is great. But voluntarily, we have had people say that if they knew they could give their guns to somebody when they're going through this major divorce, the death of a child, any of those huge disruptions, and could get them back at some point, they would do that. That gets us to the 10 minutes to keep you from getting your guns. The FFL holders, I've only talked to two because I happen to frequent gun stores. They're very concerned about that liability. So one of the possibilities in our recommendation to the committee is we could provide a state limited liability or immunity if an FFL holder voluntarily takes a number of firearms from somebody to store because of this. If they give them back, they have immunity from prosecution because why'd you give that gun back to that guy and he committed suicide kind of thing. That is an avenue. Would people use it? Don't know. 2 states, one more have tried it. It's all brand new in 23. We don't really have any data to support how well it's used. It's just an idea. We're trying to get firearms out of the house. We're not trying to make people give up their firearms. We just are giving them that opportunity. Maybe the family members will convince them to do it, whatever works. So when you look at slide 24, you'll see in our recommendations, the number one recommendation for the committee is to consider drafting a bill to create a liability waiver for FFLs who are already federally licensed to hold up firearms from the owner from any liability when they return them to the owner. Just an idea. On this slide in 24, the second possibility, we have 4 recommendations. 2 of them pretty small and easy, 3 of them really big. So bear with me. So the second one is to expand the Veterans Talking to Veterans program we talk about. Maybe that would look like a stipend that once trained people would be able to submit a voucher and the state would pay them some money to go meet with veterans that are identified through the veteran service officers or through the Veterans Commission representatives. Just an idea. So that would be to expand the program to get people to talk to people who are having mental health issues. The third and fourth recommendations, like I said, are much bigger. And again, we got some of these ideas from the governor's challenge. Number 3 is to study, and these would both require further study if the committee wished us to do it, to study ways to relieve the cost of seeking a degree in social work, mental health, psychology. Really, we were thinking about the WWAMI program for doctors, where the state buys you seats or helps provide for your degree program as long as you commit to come back to Wyoming and be a mental health provider in our state. Big deal. It's go big. Because the state has identified when we talk to the Department of Health and with the governor's challenge, we just have a lack of mental health providers. There are counties that there is no one you can go to. There are counties where the high cost of private providers basically excludes a bunch of people. So that's number 3. Number 4, and I hate to hit you all with this, is we also were trying to get creative. When I have a daughter, for example, who is in a family counseling degree program for a master's, she has to have, I think it's 2,000 hours of counseling experience as an intern as part of her degree. She doesn't get a degree unless she does 2,000 hours. Then once she graduates, she has to have, I think, another 2,000 hours under the supervision of a licensed provider before she can be certified as a counselor. So we had the idea that what if we created a program where we hire one licensed provider and provide internships for people already pursuing those kind of degrees to get their hours up working with veterans through the Veterans Commission, the VSO, all throughout the state. So it'd be a way for people to get what they need in terms of internships, paid or unpaid, totally up to how the funding is. So those 3 and 4 that go big, and it require further study, obviously, if the committee so wants us to do that. 1 and 2, well, 1 in particular, that's a bill that you could certainly consider. With that, I'll stand for your question. Sorry, we spent a lot of time on mental health, but we're very concerned about it.
Yes, Representative Pendergraft, go ahead, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little follow-up there. I guess I'm listening not just to you, but, you know, earlier we heard testimony that it was a military chaplain that saved a life. Senator Furphy, I believe it was, mentioned with the financial, having some sort of financial training and knowing that it's out there. A lot of this is education. I like the idea about providing some immunity to an FFL holder. I would suggest maybe we would look at making that even a little bit broader, because I personally had a friend of mine bring me his guns and say, would you hold these for me? And they may be afraid to go to an FFL holder that maybe I got to go back and reprove, and where it's easier to go to a friend. So I like those ideas. We can put a lot of money into a big program and not really know what the ROI is going to be there. I guess that was more of a lecture than a question.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, I like the way you're thinking. I've taken a gun from a friend under similar circumstances. Didn't even think about, even as a licensed attorney, possible liability when he wanted it back. Because we were friends, we talked. I knew how he was doing, but now that I think about it, it scares me a little bit.
Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this FFL, I guess, conversation, if you were to give your guns to a gun dealer with an FFL and they are storing said guns, are you saying they come in there with the reason of storage is because of mental health issues? Or are you just, or could we just say they're just storing a gun for somebody, end of story? And then there wouldn't be somebody having to be an armchair psychologist. It would just be a storage service. Maybe with the, and then have an exception that, you don't have any criminal liability when you release the gun back to said individual. But I think we go into a really sticky wicket here. And I think, frankly, the avenue that I would always believe in is friends. You have friends like you had and other folks that when you're having a bad day and you're not feeling real good, you talk to them. That's far better than any clinical psychologist is ever going to be. And, but I think as long as the FFL conversation, I think there's a simple way to handle it. And I think maybe that's worth talking about, but I wouldn't want to get into the idea that we're going to talk about, I'm having a mental health crisis. My goodness. So anyway, thank you. That was just what your thoughts were on that.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, no. The reason we're requesting and thinking along the FFL holder is because of mental health, but that would never enter into the conversation. The whole idea is the bill would say, if a FFL holder receives firearms voluntarily from a private citizen, if they give them back, there's no liability. We could include that, like Representative Pendergast suggested, we could include up to the legislature the same for private citizens who take a gun. We were going FFL holders because there's lots of them out there. They're licensed by the federal government. They've passed a background check. They have certain storage requirements that there's a rigor to it, but certainly the bill could include private citizens, and it would never talk about because you have mental health problems. It would always be if you voluntarily give a gun to X, if they give it back to you, they're absolved of any liability if they just gave you back your own guns.
Okay, we'll do Representative Stivar, then we'll go down this side here. But
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On number 4, the mental health. This is a great idea. My wife is a veteran, combat veteran, and she has her master's in social work. But I believe this should go through this discussion should go through the Labor Health Committee. And I think that's where that needs to go, and we need to really look at that. That's my comment. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, like I said, these last two were big asks. And really what we would ask from the committee, is this something you want us to explore? Where it ends up committee wise, certainly health would have to be involved.
Okay. Senator Murphy, then we'll get Representative Wiley.
Okay. The FFLs. What happened, I've got this personal experience. My good friend called me and said, I got new medication from the doctor and I realized it screwed up my mind. And he said, I came to my senses and I was holding one of my guns to my head. And he said, I woke up and he said, scared the heck out of me. And so he called me and said, I want to give you the keys to my gun cabinet. I don't want to have access in case something like that happens again. So I hold the keys to his gun cabinet, but it was something simple. This guy didn't have necessarily mental health issues. It was a bad prescription, but that's the point. And so someone holding those firearms or keys shouldn't be liable. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make that point.
Hey, Representative Wiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I think looking at the FFL thing, I think we need to broaden that. Another example of this would be folks pawning, weapons and then going and getting them for a liability issue or something. But as soon as we start asserting labels or anything to it, I think although well-intended, we could go down a rabbit hole that we don't want to go to, and it could cause problems in the future. So if we do look at that, I think we should broaden it and give more of a blanketed, immunity to folks that are just trying to do well. Because I think, as you've already heard, it's a common practice. I know I've heard of it. I know I've practiced it before. So I don't know if we should label it, and we should keep it a broad protection.
Okay, any further Representative Stiver?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One more comment on the FFLs and taking firearms. I think that's a big rabbit hole you're going to go down. Because what are they going to bring into this? People that's got restraining orders that are not supposed to have firearms? I mean, that's a big hole. And I think we need to be very careful on that.
Mr. Chairman, all I can say is Representative Stiver, absolutely. That is why FFL holders don't want to do this, because they don't want to be working so hard to do background checks on people and all. But
go ahead, Talisa.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to say that Montana's statute is not limited to the FFL holders. It's more broad, and it just says no cause of action may arise against an individual or a private entity for returning a firearm to the firearm owner at the termination of a firearm hold agreement. And then it defines a firearm hold agreement as meaning a written or oral agreement between a firearm owner and another individual or private entity, in which the other individual or private entity takes physical possession of the firearm owner's lawful possessed firearm at the owner's request, holds the firearm for an agreed period of time, and returns the firearm to the owner according to the terms of the agreement. Then it also provides an exception saying that the immunity doesn't apply if to an action arising from a firearm hold agreement if the action was the result of otherwise unlawful conduct on the part of the individual or private entity holding the firearm. So it kind of covers what Stiver was saying, that if they aren't supposed to hold it or they do something with those persons' firearms that they're not supposed to do, that there's an except that they don't get that immunity. But that Montana's is more broad to include like any person or an entity, so.
Gotcha. Well, it sounds like a good start if that's what we want to do. So go ahead. Who's that? Representative Berger.
Held firearm for my, Mr. Chairman, I had a firearm for my brother. And these FFLs are about firearms, but we forgot about his crossbow. So what about other weapons, you know, knives? Be careful how far we go. There's more than just firearms.
Yeah, thanks for that input. I think that's, we can consider all those possibilities, and that'll come down to how we craft that language and to include, I think, Senator Furphy's input that there's ways to disallow access to firearms without necessarily taking possession of them either. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I think that's what we're going to be discussing if we move forward with the bill draft, making sure that we deal with all these, find as many unintended consequences as possible and try to anticipate them. So.
And Mr. Chairman, the Montana language is a good starting point. We were concentrated on firearms, guns specifically, because the data shows that's by far the preferred choice of those that commit suicide. But there are certainly lots of other means.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, do we have anybody from the Wyoming Veterans Commission? That's okay.
And
That's-
again,
yeah,
Mr. Chairman, Veterans Commission is part of us, and we've had lots of conversations about this. Lots of this data came from the Veterans Commission, and they are very supportive of whatever this committee wants to do along these lines.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, any further public comment on this issue? Anybody online? Okay. We'll go ahead and close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move a bill that would mimic the Montana bill
Okay,
for the holding of firearms.
okay, gotcha.
Second.
Okay, moved by Senator Kolb, seconded by Representative Nymek. Any discussion? Okay, yeah, I think that's a good starting point. Probably have some tweaks, and I'm sure maybe we'll hear from the trial lawyers too. We'll find out. But that'll be fun. We'll see what happens. So, any further discussion on that motion? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That motion carries. Any further discussion, Representative Strybar?
I make a motion on 3 and 3 of working with the Labor Health Committee is to get a bill draft on the social work degree through UW and have a bill draft ready for that.
Okay, and so just so I understand, it'd be sort of like a incentive program where we'll have pay for their degree in exchange for them sticking around for a certain amount of years. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, and state, okay,
For veterans.
for veterans, okay. Moved by Representative Strybar, seconded by, sorry, who was that? Representative Berger. Okay, any discussion on that? Go ahead.
Well, could we take a look at the bill for everybody instead of just veterans, but just anyone going into?
That would be an
Do we
easy
need to make
amendment,
it
I think.
veteran Specific.
Go ahead.
I think it'd be an easy amendment, but again, a veteran's gonna talk to a veteran. Personal experience
Right.
is a veteran's gonna talk to another veteran about a problem than somebody that has no military experience, because they don't know what that veteran has been through. So I'd like to stick it strictly for veterans.
Okay, so that's the motion. Okay, all right. Like I said, we'll have that discussion, I imagine, and any further discussion as far as a starting point for a bill draft? Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a labor health issue. I don't think it belongs here. I think it could start here, but I don't know if we should work on a bill draft. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Representative Pendergraph.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we all know, this has been a major issue with the chief executive. And it goes beyond, we see it reflected in the veteran community, but it goes well beyond that. And I would tend to agree with Senator Kolb that perhaps this needs to be addressed or pushed in another place.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tend to agree wholeheartedly with the past two speakers. However, we just drafted a bill that I fully 100% believe belongs in the Judiciary Committee for immunity claims. So I do believe that the more minds that we have melding on these topics, the better. Instead of just getting out to the floor and then having our discussion with them. There's nothing wrong with sharing this bill draft with the Labor Health Committee. Let's go ahead and draft the bill. Let's see what we have going. We can vote the bill down if we choose not to move it forward or if we want to table the bill, but let's at least have the discussion, and the more minds melded, the better.
Right. I would just, emphasize that, on other issues, yes, certainly. I think like a trespass issue that was important to the agriculture community is in judiciary. And, they're the subject matter experts, but they don't really care about the subject either in that instance. And so I think with this committee's nexus, we're perfectly capable of having testimony from attorneys, groups that represent attorneys. And I think we could, do a good job of getting adequate input from the folks who are experts. So anyways, Representative Stetbar, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's what I said when I did that, is with collaboration with the Labor Health Committee, and Representative O'Hearn is on the Labor Health Committee. So he can take it over there, or chairmans can talk to chairmans on both sides. But this, and then let them decide. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
Motion carries. Okay, any further discussion? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, what a bill draft would actually look like related to number 2, the study of expanding veterans, talking to veterans program. What would that draft actually look like? Sounds like something to move forward to me. Not sure how to phrase that.
Right, and that's good, Mr. Smith, if you could just talk about a little bit about that program. What's the funding like? Is it all volunteer based? What's the nexus with Wyoming Military Department, the Veterans Commission? Just a little bit more detail as to what we have going right now. It sounds like it just got started too. So any just a little bit more detail on that program, I guess.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Veterans Talking to Veterans started last year, basically under a grant that the Wyoming Veterans Commission got. I can't tell you who it's from, but I can find out. Don't know the amount. And it was really for training of veterans to how to be a volunteer, unlicensed counselor for other veterans. The things to talk about, when to get professional help, when to, throw up a red flare and call the ambulance kind of thing. And it's been well received in the veterans community. We've had dozens of people go through the program. Currently, it is just national grant supported. There's no state or federal money involved. The idea here was expanding it. And from our perspective in the military department, the Veterans Commission, we were asking the committee if they wanted us to come up with ideas of how to expand it to address the mental health concerns among our veteran populace, perhaps for next time. We were talking about maybe a little pot of money that we could pay people's travel expenses to go meet with veterans if they're identified as having a problem. For the trained person, you could have money outside of the grant to train more people. You could create a little bit of money to create a website where veterans could ask for help and do it all online. There's a lot of ideas you could have. We were really just putting it out to this committee to ask, what would you like us to look into? We haven't spent a lot of time on this, but we can come back with more details if that's the committee's desire for next time. I realize that's September. We're getting close to the session to work a bill, but we just wanted a little direction from the committee.
Okay, yeah, that helps, Mr. Chairman. So we're not really looking at a bill draft at this point. We're looking to encourage you to come back with more ideas, possible bill draft in September, sounds like to me, so.
Right, yeah, I think I'd benefit from maybe examples of what other states are doing, if anything, more information about the grant, how long it lasts, what's the stability of that funding source. Is it, it could be gone in a year or two, and maybe just some numbers as to, it's only been a year, but how many veterans have we helped? What have they, has there been a positive result? Have they, is there any way to measure what the results are? And, just a little bit more information along those lines, I think would be helpful for our next meeting.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Obi-Mueller, that's all we needed. We just need you to tell us, we have limited resources. We're trying to figure out what's important to the committee. So that's enough direction for us in September. If the committee will put it on their agenda, we'll hash it all out.
Okay. Gotcha.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman,
Representative Wiley.
could we also do that with number 4 as well?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. If the committee is interested. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We could have more information. And maybe that, I don't know, that would even be I hate to say it, a budget amendment or part of the budget process if you're talking about an additional position with the, VSO. And so that's another avenue we could take. Not necessarily a bill draft, but go beg and plead our friends on appropriations if
Yes, sir.
that's a path forward too. But yeah, certainly either way, we need supporting information about what that would look like. So.
And again, I appreciate the committee's direction. It's important to us. I mean, obviously, no one likes to hear anybody commit suicide, and it's an identified risk factor and a problem in our populace, and we want to address it. So I appreciate the committee's direction.
And so the only other potential for bill draft that you mentioned the financial stressors, and mentioned getting laid off, but another huge financial stressor for many of our citizens is property taxes. So don't know if the committee wants to get in on that. Right now, there's a limitation on the veterans exemption where you have to basically deploy, right, to get that benefit. I wonder if it would help if we expanded the eligibility to either all veterans or even to active duty or National Guard personnel currently serving. That would be another lever we could pull on the property tax issue. So not sure where that's going to end up. And I know that it's on a much broader topic, but I'd like to throw that out there as a possibility for the committee as well.
And Mr. Chairman, I didn't mention this and we didn't have it in the slides. I don't want the committee to not understand some of the other things. We have financial counselors within the Guard. They're civilians. Some of them are contract employees. We've lost some of those positions, but the Army and the Air both have a family support person, and part of their job is financial counseling. There are also at various times we've had people we can refer to from the community who are willing to help veterans, particularly in finances. So we have a number of programs to try to get at it. The problem on the financial side, just like on the mental health side, people have to ask. And that's sometimes hard to do. We find out they're having a problem when they're entering bankruptcy sometimes.
Right.
But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further discussion on this topic, committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll see what we can do at our next meeting. So committee, looks like we're back more or less on schedule. We're a little behind, but we'll just say come back at 1:15 for lunch. And we'll finish up our last topic with Homeland Security.